IB Nation, welcome back to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's a Tuesday, and it is a special edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast because we are talking about a commitment. And usually we're on here talking about high school commitments, but obviously we're amidst the transfer portal chaos, which is the 2023 offseason already, getting ready for Notre Dame's bowl game against Oregon State in the Sun Bowl on the 29th of December. But we have a lot to talk about, obviously, because Notre Dame has landed former Duke quarterback Riley Leonard to to be the face moving forward of Notre Dame season for the 2024 season. We're not going to skate around that fact, obviously. We're going to talk a lot about backstory, fit with the program. We're going to talk about his, and more importantly, what does he bring to the field as a football player? His strengths, his potential fit with the scheme, and also some things that we want to see improve upon, obviously, moving into his first year with Notre Dame. Brian, it's been a crazy couple weeks. I know that we've been very on top of this commitments and this recruitment overall.
Well,
and
we can tell people why, Ryan, now.
Yeah.
Ryan's got a pretty good relationship with Riley Leonard.
I do. I had somebody at the Notre Dame beat. I'm not going to say their name on the live show, but they texted me the one day. They're like, "How the heck did you get an interview with Riley Leonard?" I'm like, "That's called relationships, baby."
Right.
So I was literally texting with Riley this morning, and he had told me something like, yeah, we could definitely connect for maybe another interview soon type of thing. And I was like, that's interesting that he's texting me that now. And then obviously just a couple hours later, he was officially committed to the University of Notre Dame. So it's been a wild couple weeks though. Last Wednesday and Thursday, Riley had obviously taken an official visit to the University of Notre Dame, his first time on campus, obviously taking a look at everything, being able to sit down with the coaches, being able to be on campus with Bo Collins, who's now committed to the University of Notre Dame as well on the same 2-day span. So, but then there's also been a lot of, which is always always the case. There's been some media, speculating, oh, maybe this isn't a done deal. Ohio State's trying to get in there. Auburn's trying to get there. A lot of other schools. Yeah.
And
a lot of other schools. Yeah. Well, I would say this, Brian, and we'll talk obviously more about the backstory, but this was always going to be Notre Dame for like the last 2 weeks for me, right? It was just, Auburn was trying to continue to get in there. Ohio State obviously had their interest.
What was the process going to be like? That's what it was down to. What was this process going to be like? He's going to end up in Notre Dame, but does he want to go through the process or not? That's really what it boiled down to. I mean, let's be honest, this is a kid that Notre Dame fans of, I should say IB Nation, let's just say that, should be very familiar with, because we've been talking about him since, you first started talking about him in like a mailbag or something like beginning of the 2022 season, because he came out against Temple and just looked great, had some big games that season. I was breaking the Kansas game again down last night, just like, he's that dude, right? And of course, we talked a lot about him going into the Notre Dame game against Duke this year. He's a guy that we talked about over the summer. Why was Duke a team that we were concerned about? We talked about when you've got a dynamic playmaker quarterback, that's always concerning.
Yep.
And that's exactly what he is. So this one has been in the works really for a while. And as we kind of dive into the backstory, and I'll let Ryan tell a bunch of it, but really for all the fans that want to give Sam Hartman a hard time, if Riley Leonard ends up being a dude at Notre Dame and takes Notre Dame to the heights that people hope he can, give Sam Hartman a big assist on this one, a big assist, because Sam really started pushing for this a while ago. I'm just leaving it at that. Right. And they have a relationship. They're both ACC quarterbacks and things along those lines. There's a lot of respect there. Sam has made sure to let Riley know about all the benefits and the concerns of being the quarterback at Notre Dame. And because it's not concerns, but it's like, look, you got to be prepared, man. The spotlight's bright. You know what I mean? Like Sam Hartman went from a school that a 9-3 season that where Notre Dame played like they did this year and won the games they did this year would have gotten him tons of praise and love, where you got Notre Dame fans calling him a failure. It's a tough place.
Yep.
And, it's just kind of part of Sam buying into what makes Notre Dame special is he gave an assist. Now, look, the staff did a great job. Once he got in the portal, it was you got to sell him the vision quick. And Notre Dame, you got to give the staff props. They immediately got on this and said and sold why he had to come. But Ryan, it was if you didn't read the story that Ryan wrote with his interview with Riley after the visit, and if you actually thought there was a chance he was going anywhere else, I don't know where that came from.
I love how people read sometimes because the only thing they saw was that, like, tentatively he might visit Ohio State and Auburn, maybe. And I
Right.
even put in there, like, we'll see if that happens. You know what I mean? Because, like, that's just the general vibe of the conversation. But
Right.
I think that starting off with Sam Hartman was a great assist there, though, Brian. I mean, just quickly, because I remember when Deuce Knight made his commitment, and I talked to him afterwards for just a recap of his commitment. He talked a lot about sitting down with Sam Hartman and just talking about, like, NIL and what's it like being the quarterback at Notre Dame and that type of stuff. So yeah, man. I mean, Sam Hartman, for the things that are the negatives to what we've talked about during his 1 year at Notre Dame, from, you know, wanting him to be more productive and play better in
Mm-hmm.
certain opportunities, he really did do a lot of great things. From NIL showed that you can be a very successful and profitable quarterback at Notre Dame, and he was a very good ambassador for the university as well. Really good relationships, obviously, for a couple of the key quarterbacks for Notre Dame moving forward, obviously. So yes, he had a big assist with the Riley Leonard conversation. I know people obviously point to, you know, him waiting after the Duke game for Riley on the crutches, and sure, like, there was obviously a relationship even before that, and there was a relationship that was built after that situation that happened, and he was a guiding light, obviously. But Notre Dame, from the moment that it became apparent that Riley Leonard was going to enter the portal, that was their guy. Just all
Yeah.
along, that was their guy. And I had talked someone, actually a pretty good source close to the program, that had talked about Riley was their guy because they thought back and they talked to the defensive coaching staff about that week leading up to Duke, just how, like, amped that coaching staff was to try to have
Yeah.
to defend that guy. Like, oh my God, man, like, that is just the biggest headache in the world to try to stop a player like that. And then obviously he fits everything that you want in a quarterback at Notre Dame, as far as he brings a dynamic skill set. He brings an all-around skill set that I think that's going to adopt into a little bit of a different looking offense moving forward, which we'll talk about. But also, high academic kid, really, really spiritual kid as well. I mean, he talks about God openly as often as any quarterback or any player I've ever spoken to. Like, he is very open as far as he's very religious. He believes in God. He has that spirituality, and that obviously was a driving force as well. And I mean, again, Auburn, they had a little bit of an interesting pull in this thing, right? Because one, he's from the state of Alabama, for
Right.
one, from the state of Alabama. His girlfriend also goes to the University of Alabama, Auburn University. I almost said University of Alabama, but she goes to Auburn. So there was a pool there. And then obviously Ohio State had also had a high level of interest in doing the research, at least, and trying to get him on campus to continue to recruit him, because Ohio State does really good things offensively on a year-to-year basis, right? Like, why
Mhm.
would a quarterback not want to potentially play in that offense with all the great pass catchers that Ohio State has put out in recent years? So there was some other programs that had good resources and good pitches to a player like Riley Leonard, but ultimately, everything from a personal
It was,
perspective, past relationship perspective, it was Notre Dame, and it was always going to be Notre Dame. And I never had a single doubt, even when people are talking about those visits and people are talking about what's taken so long. I mean, we literally had someone on the message board, was it this morning, say like, "Oh, is there cold feet here?" Like, or something like that. I'm just like, guys, just
well,
let this
it's
happen,
like,
man. Let it happen.
yeah, Ryan, it's like when you see the video they put out, you're like, okay, now you guys know why it took X number of days for him to do it. Like, those things don't get done by the end of his visit, right? I mean, this is just, sometimes I just wish you guys would, would just trust us a little bit, Ryan. And one of the things that, if you want to talk about, um, his faith being a part of it, clearly it was. I mean, this is a kid that, if you watch games this year, he had two wristbands. On one, he had a Bible verse, and the other, he had a cross.
Yes. Yes.
And he had Matthew 23:12. I know, I was looking at one of them, and I think it was the NC State game, Louisville game, one of those games that he played in. He had Matthew 23:12, which is, whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. And so, like, you talk about a kid that, like, fits
Yes.
the uniqueness of Notre Dame, even though, I mean, yeah. So just all those things fit too. And then, of course, having he's a kid that's from a conference you play a lot against a lot of teams in the conference. He's a guy that your defense to prepare for. I love that part of the staff reaching out to the defensive staff, like, hey, what do you guys think about this? Oh man, this guy was he was tough to prepare for, and
Yes.
and those type of things. So the backstory is kind of fun, but it was always going to be Notre Dame, Ryan. I mean, that was the
Yeah.
deal. It was always going to be Notre Dame. There was never a
It,
question if it was going to be Notre Dame ever.
it was one of the worst kept secrets in the portal this year that it was going to be Notre Dame. Like, I'm trying to think of one where I was just like, that was a worst kept secret. Like,
Right.
Riley Leonard to Notre Dame was just the one that I think people knew was going to happen for a long time. And then obviously there were some variables that people started overthinking it a little bit. Like, oh, is he interested in that? Is he interested there? Is he pulling away from Notre Dame? Is he having cold feet? And it's just like, it's part of the process, man. It's part of the process. Look, Brian, I'm not a big, social media, likes and that person, right? Like the guy that's going to be the watcher.
Right.
But if you look at every person that Riley Leonard is following on Instagram and Twitter, current Notre Dame players and players that Notre Dame is targeting in the portal, it's like,
Right.
guys, let's put one and one together here. We are all very intelligent people here, right? Well, not me, but everybody else here is very intelligent people. And you understand that actions speak louder than words at the end of the day. And Riley Leonard has already been recruiting wide receivers to come with him to the University of Notre Dame even before he went public today.
Yeah, no doubt. So good. It's like how many times did you get asked, Ryan, what's the plan B? And my plan B is a battle between Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchie, and CJ Carr. That's the plan B. I mean, there was no plan B for Notre Dame. It was Riley Leonard. That's our guy. Right. And it also speaks to the people say, well, you're getting Riley Leonard because you don't have a lot of faith in the guys on the roster. No, actually, the way that they went about this recruitment shows that they do have some faith there, but they just view Riley Leonard as a game changer. And having talked to people, look, there are Notre Dame guys, Notre Dame people on staff, back end, front office, assistants, all that have a lot of NFL connections. And they heard from a lot of different people like, look, this is a kid that's got first round NFL draft pick talent. Now, is he a first round draft pick right now? I don't think so.
After he got injured and everything,
right.
It was over with.
But the talent is there. And there just was and he was going to be a guy that was going to be attractive to other transfers and other receiver transfers. And so this played a role in Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell picking Notre Dame. Because again, guys, I promise you, this has been done for a while.
Yes.
This isn't a deal. It has been. So when Chris Mitchell visited, even though Riley Leonard wasn't on campus, he knew that Riley Leonard was going to be the quarterback at Notre Dame.
I was going to say that the visit last Wednesday and Thursday, guys, that wasn't where they sealed the deal with Riley Leonard. It was merely a formality at that point.
Right.
You saw that cool video he put out today, right? That's what that was for. That was what that was for.
Yeah, and it was also you do. There's a level of you do want to be able to look people in the eye and just get that final feel like, okay, everything about this makes sense. All the boxes have been checked. Let me just look people in the eye and make sure these are people that I really, really want to play with. And there's also merit to sitting down and talking to players face to face, getting the real sense of what's the good and what's the bad. And then if you also want to feel better today, did you see who was in the video with him, showing him around, trying to convince him to come to Notre Dame for next year? It's Benjamin Morrison on one side.
Yep.
Who else was on the other one?
Xavier Watts.
Yep.
I think I just said Benjamin Watts by accident. I think I just
hey, that's a great secondary right there. Benjamin Watts, baby. There we go. So yeah, exactly. So obviously the backstory, Ryan, is very intriguing to getting Riley Leonard. This was a guy that Notre Dame had targeted for a while. Everything made sense. So this was going to be a no-brainer all along. And as far as what does it say about the current roster, it doesn't say anything other than the staff likes this group a lot. They just think they're not quite ready to lead this team to a championship. And at the end of the day, you want to know the backstory of why Notre Dame is making this move. It's not so much about a lack of faith of the players on the roster. It's more about they just think Riley Leonard can be that good. And in my opinion, I don't know that there was a Riley Leonard in the portal last year, to be completely honest with you. As much as I like Sam Hartman, the biggest difference for me, Ryan, and I'm curious if you agree or disagree, when I first heard about Sam Hartman as an option, and because I think you and I were on the same page on this, I was skeptical. I worried about the fit and just some of the other things. And then you dive into the film and you're like, you know what? This can work. There's some pieces there. This can work. I like Sam Hartman. He brings a lot to the table, leadership, all that. This was one where as soon as you heard about Riley Leonard, I mean, even before we thought Riley Leonard would be transferring, you and I would have conversations like, if he ever goes in the portal, I'd love to get that kid. Yep. It was a no-brainer because there's just a difference in one kid was a great kid, great leader, productive, got everything out of his ability in Sam Hartman. The other kid is like exactly kind of what you want in a modern quarterback. He's 6'4", he's 215, 220. He's really athletic. If you want to be impressed today, go watch his high school basketball film as he's like cocking back and dunking, doing windmill dunks in games, dropping like 20-something. Wasn't he like player of the year in his level in Alabama as a senior or something like that in basketball? It's like
Brian,
7, 8 player of the year or something.
There was a time before COVID hit that Riley Leonard thought he was going to be a college basketball player.
Division I college basketball.
Yes, Division I. His dad played at the Citadel at basketball, and his uncle played at Georgetown. So Riley was a hooper, man. He wasn't just a good basketball player. Like, he was a hooper. Yeah. So, I mean, and that shouldn't take anybody by surprise when watching him play, that he's a really good athlete. You know, like you kind of see that very instantaneously when you put on film, obviously. But yes, he was a very good basketball player.
And so when Notre Dame looks at it, they see all those things. They see the arm talent. They see the playmaking ability, and they say, this is a guy that we think can take us to the next level. That's really what it boils down to. It was not a, we're just going to have to repeat this cycle over and over again. It was, there weren't a lot of, people talk about Will Howard. I'm sure there were people from the back office reaching out because you have to do your due diligence. I mean, I bet you they reached out to, I know for a fact they've reached out to hundreds of kids. Doesn't mean they have interest in them. It was always about Riley or bust. And by bust, I shouldn't even say bust. Riley or we're comfortable with where we are. That's really what it boiled down to. And then the next group of guys were going to be depth guys, kind of like we've talked about, like Tristan Gebbia, Hunter Johnson, what they did at Clemson and Ohio State and Clemson, respectively. That kind of coach in the field situation. But this kid was just too good not to pursue. And again, as you said, Ryan, as soon as the two sides connected, it was inevitable.
I remember when Sam Hartman it became clear that Sam Hartman was going to be a guy for Notre Dame, Brian, and even before that, when we were just kind of doing our due diligence on, these are the kind of the guys that Notre Dame might be taking a deeper look at. I was very hesitant on Sam Hartman at the time, and that was one that you had to talk me into at the time. And eventually, I was like, okay, this can work, right? Like, it can work. You didn't have to convince me on Riley Leonard. Like, you didn't have to convince me as long as he's healthy. Like, that's the only thing, and the thing that we'll talk about in like the areas of concern is that he is coming off of obviously an injury-plagued year. Mm-hmm. But if he is fully healthy, I have no concerns at all about Riley Leonard being Notre Dame's quarterback next year. I have very little. Like, there's things obviously that he can improve on, as there always is, but he is a very talented football player. And I think people need to remember this, because I think even if he decided to go back into the NFL this year, right now, I still think he would have been a day 2 pick because he's so talented, because he would have been at 6'4", 220, probably running 4.6 flat and doing all that type of stuff.
Let me ask you, because we're going to dive next into Ryan kind of breaking down his game. We're going to talk about the different things we like and the different skill sets and what we've seen on film and things that he's going to have to either improve upon or that are concerns that we have, because nobody's perfect. There are always things that you can, and then we'll at the end, we'll kind of talk about his fit into the Notre Dame offense and then what this pickup means for the future of the Notre Dame offense. But let's first, I do want to ask you this first, Ryan. If he were to jump into the draft, am I kind of accurate in saying that, like, right now the consensus seems to be in some order, the top 3 quarterback prospects are Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels in some order?
Yeah.
Is that pretty accurate? I mean, you're going to have other people that have this guy, that guy.
Sure.
You're going to have Michael Penix in the draft, Bo Nix. So there's going to be some guys in the draft, Spencer Rattler. Yes. Where, even with the context of the injury, where would he have likely fallen? What range would he have fallen in this year's NFL draft? After the top 3?
I still don't think that. I think that he probably would have been like quarterback 5 off the board, because I think Bo Nix is going to get drafted pretty high as well. But I really think that regardless, he was going to have a tough time getting out of the top 50 picks, even if he left this year, because again, like, they just don't make kids like him a lot. Like, you look at it, and every single year, Notre Dame, any NFL takes gambles on toolsy kids that they can fix every single year. And Riley Leonard,
I hated his college film. Riley Leonard's a way better college football player than Will Levis was. But so far, Will Levis seems to be doing pretty good in the NFL.
He's doing fine. He's doing better than I initially thought. So, yeah, it looks like that he might have fallen into a situation that is helping his physical gifts turn into production, obviously, on the field. And I think that Riley Leonard still would have been drafted pretty high. But there's a big difference between maybe going top 15 or top 20 and going in the second round from the money perspective, the guaranteed money of the first contract. Right? It's a huge difference. So going back to school, showing that you're able to stay healthy, because that's going to be the question mark, especially coming off of this year, is you have an ankle, you have a foot, and we'll see if it's able to stay healthy. But I think that he had the opportunity to still go very high as long as the medicals were clean, because he's a smart kid. He's been productive when healthy, and he has physical gifts where if he's 2022 version just this year at Notre Dame, but a little bit better, he could be a superstar. Like, he has that type of upside to him. And I think that he just needs to prove that he can do it again and not have a setback injury wise.
Sounds good. All right, let's get into Ryan. Let's talk about Riley Leonard's game. We're going to just kind of do like an overview of his game, talk about what his game is about, and then get into the strengths of it. And then, of course, areas where he needs to improve or some concerns. Just overall, you're getting a different type of quarterback than you got with Sam Hartman and Jack Cohn, the last two transfers.
Very.
This is not they're not good players. Notre Dame went, 20-5 with those two kids at quarterback, right? They did some good things at Notre Dame. This isn't meant to be he's better, they're worse. It's just different. You know, Jack was very much a sit in the pocket guy. Sam brought a little bit more mobility to the table, but his mobility was more about if there's an opening in front of him, he was fast enough to kind of run through it and make some plays. We saw that against Duke, obviously, in that game. We saw that against Clemson, but he wasn't a guy who was going to make a lot of plays in the pocket.
Right.
That's the reality of it. Or out of the pocket, I should say. With Riley Leonard, he was both of those guys were going to sit in the pocket, do their damage, distributing the football. That's when they were at their best. Notre Dame would certainly wants a quarterback that can distribute the football, Ryan. But what they also want is a playmaker. And Riley brings a lot more of a playmaking ability to the table, a guy that is going to make plays with his arm and his legs, and a guy where everything doesn't have to be perfect for him to be successful. That's really what it boils down to for me.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it a ton of times. Yeah, big picture. I've said it probably 5 or 6 times on the channel already, but he makes the imperfect perfect at times. He's a the get out of jail free card thing I've been saying, right? But like he basically is a mulligan at the quarterback position. When things aren't right and you're in a bad play, he can make a bad play a good play a lot of the time. I mean, and he is one of those kids that is so gifted athletically and so sturdy of a player in the pocket that he can also extend. And he extends as a passer a lot too. I think people just kind of assume that he's just this rushing threat. But I mean, I was watching some film of him just this morning again, where I mean, he's throwing some seeds as an extender and just kind of stepping up in the pocket and being able to be that guy. So a play's never dead with Riley Leonard. And obviously he brings a dynamic that Notre Dame hasn't had a quarterback in a few years now. Like, they just haven't had that guy. I mean, Ian Book gave you some of that, right? I mean, to have a true 6'4", 215+ pound kid that's probably going to run somewhere around 4.6 flat, can be a leading rusher of a Power 5 football team, which he was at Duke last year, and he was at Duke this year before he got hurt as well, and still be able to be a player that has a lot of upside as a passer. Notre Dame just hasn't had that recently as much, and they haven't really had that since that little string of, like the Deshaun Kaisers of the world from a talent perspective, like the Malik Zairs to a degree. Like, they just haven't had those type of dual threat capacity quarterbacks. So he is very different from what they've had recently. He's a little different also from what they have currently on the roster. Now, some of the players on the roster, like Kenny Minchie, for instance, and CJ Carr, when he's officially, ready to go and get rolling, they bring some of the dual threat as far as extenders, right? Like, they can move in the pocket. They have quick feet, but they're never going to be 700-yard rushers in a season like Riley Leonard has been for Duke, 699 yards in 2022. It's just a little bit of a different dynamic. He is different than what Notre Dame has had, and difference brings two things, right? Different means that there's different potential. There's a different capacity that you could reach. Also, different means that you have to be able to utilize that difference. So you have to adopt and be able to adapt to that type of quarterback. So there's a couple differences that are going to need to happen at Notre Dame at the quarterback position. But Riley Leonard is certainly a different cat than what you've had a quarterback stylistically the last couple of years.
We did not say this earlier, Ryan. We'll end this segment with this, obviously, or before we move on to fully diving into it. But he has 1 year of eligibility left for those asking. He played as a freshman. I think he played like 9 or 10 games as a freshman at least.
He was the backup, yeah.
Yeah, and came off the bench, did some running around, and then obviously was a starter in 2022, and then played 7 games this year. So
Yep.
he doesn't have a potential for a redshirt opportunity, and he came into college after COVID.
Yep.
So he doesn't have a COVID year either. He has 1 year of eligibility, and then that's kind of what they were looking for, Ryan, too, is a guy that had that 1 year, can bridge that gap.
Yep.
So let's dive into Riley, specifically what we like about his game, Ryan. We've been talking a lot about it, but we have to focus first and foremost on that playmaker aspect, because when you look at Notre Dame's best teams, in my opinion, over the years, you had playmakers at quarterback. Now, playmakers can be different things. To me, Jimmy Clausen was a playmaker, not because he could do anything with his legs, because he couldn't, but he could do things with his arms that just not a lot of people could do, right? Just a guy that's not just running the offense and getting the, like Jack Cohn. I love Jack Cohn. You're not going to find, outside of the Cohn family, I don't know that you're going to find a bigger Jack Cohn fan than me. I loved what he did for Notre Dame. And I've said before, you and I did talk about this. I know if you could have had Jack Cohn on last year's 2022 football team, that team would have been really hard to beat. Just a heck of a kid. And him and Sam both did a great job of buying into Notre Dame. Like Riley will have to buy into Notre Dame, which I don't think is going to be an issue. No. But those guys were, here's the offense, run it, get the ball where it needs to get it to your playmakers. That was their job. And they both occasionally would scramble. Jack had that, what was it, USC? And it took him forever it was like a 28-yard touchdown run. It felt like it took him forever to get to the end zone. Might have been North Carolina. What you're getting from Riley, Ryan, is, yes, a guy that can make a lot of plays with his arm. There's no doubt. And we'll talk specifically about the different things he can do. But you can't dispute the fact that what makes him unique is his ability to make plays inside of the structure of the offense, but more importantly, outside the structure. And why that matters is when you look at games like Clemson, when you look at Ohio State, when you look at, Louisville, when things aren't going well and they've got a good read on what you're doing, or guys aren't getting open, or whatever the case may be, do you have a guy that can go make plays? And I've said this, I don't know that Riley Leonard would have done any better than Sam Hartman throwing the football against Ohio State. But one thing I can say confidently, you don't get stopped twice on 4th and 1 with Riley Leonard as your quarterback.
That's not a knock on Sam Hartman. He might score on that 4th and 1.
And that's not a knock on Sam Hartman. You didn't bring Sam Hartman here to put his shoulder down and run over a DB and pick up a 4th down, right? Riley Leonard, you're thinking he can make those plays. And when you look at the Clemson game, when your receivers aren't getting open and your offensive line's getting their butt kicked in the second half and things just aren't going well, he's the kind of kid that can go make a play, just like he did with the Duke offense against Notre Dame. Notre Dame was shutting Duke's offense down. Second half, Riley started getting going with his legs and started doing some different things, and that kind of sprung them to a couple touchdown scores in the second half. So you're bringing that kind of guy to where your margin for error, Ryan, increases as an offense because you have a kid like him, because you don't always have to be in the right call and the right check and everything's got to go perfectly. This is the guy. You want an example? If you haven't watched the Clemson game, folks, Ryan, you know exactly what play I'm going to talk about right now. It was a 7-6 game, I believe, and they're near midfield, and they run a quarterback run. Riley gets hit by 3 guys in the backfield, bounces off of him. Next thing you know,
he's quarterback counter, right? Like a quarterback counter,
and he's sprinting up the right sideline for like 40 yards and gets them into the scoring territory. Like, that play had no business working, none. We've seen Audric Estime make runs like that. We saw him make a run like that this year, Ryan. You've got a quarterback that can do things like that now. And that just adds a completely different element to your offense.
And on that play, I think he shrugged off at least one of Barrett Carter or Jeremiah Trotter. Yes. And also he outraced Nate Wiggins to the sideline on that play and beat him around the corner. And Nate Wiggins, folks, is going to go high in this draft, and he's going to fly when he tests. That kid is very athletic. But, I mean, Brian, like, I'll say it like this, right? I think the biggest misnomer about Riley Leonard that some Notre Dame fans that don't like the move are going to put out there is this is a running quarterback. And I hate that label. I hate it so much because I'm watching this kid. And honestly, I think that the Duke offense and skill position was a little bit of a disservice to him at times because he is navigating. He is sticking hard in the pocket. He's a very strong, sturdy kid in the pocket, by the way. He can shrug off would-be rushers and be able to move and navigate. But eventually, there were just some plays where you're just like, nobody's open, man. Like, what are you going to do? Like, no one's there. And that's where that dual threat capacity really brings in. Because, yeah, they do some quarterback run game stuff with him. You just mentioned a quarterback counter that he ran. But a lot of his rushes are actually off of just him being a playmaker as a passer, being an extender, be a guy that can pull the football and be that type of dude. But at the baseline, because I think Notre Dame fans will notice, I retweeted a couple of clips that I put up even before the season this last year of Riley Leonard throwing the football from different arm angles. I think everyone will notice I'm not tweeting out runs that Riley Leonard did in 2022. I'm not doing that. I'm putting out there that I think that this kid has legitimate tools to be a big time quarterback. He has a strong arm. He has a quick release. He throws from different arm angles. He can do all that type of stuff. I think if Notre Dame is able to put good skill around him, which obviously they are hitting the portal to do, I think that Riley Leonard has a chance to blossom into a very good passer on this level because you saw a lot of it in 2022. 2023, it's a lost season at the end of the day. That's how I would phrase it. You got off to a good start, then injuries happen, you come back, another injury happens. It's a little bit of a lost season. But at the baseline, this is a sturdy pocket passer that can also kill you with his legs. This is a true dual threat of the word, but this isn't Pat White at quarterback, all due respect, right? This isn't Tim Tebow at quarterback, all due respect. This is a pocket quarterback that also happens to run 4.6 flat. That's who Riley Leonard is, in my opinion.
And if you want to know why the NFL likes him, it's that right there. Who are the best quarterbacks in the NFL for the most part? It's guys that can rip you up in the pocket and guys can also make plays with their leg. And it's all Jalen Hurts makes plays in different ways than Pat Mahomes, who makes plays in different ways than Josh Allen. Yep. You know, but Joe Burrow's a kind of a comp, you know, as far as like another guy that he's not the athlete that Riley did, but he's not a stiff. You need guys that can move and make plays, and Riley can be dynamic moving, not just, you know, being able to having escapability. You know, you've praised Brock Purdy for his pocket mobility. He's not going to hurt you as a runner. Brock Purdy's not coming to Notre Dame in his senior year and running for 699 yards and 13 touchdowns. There's different ways to use your feet to make plays, and Riley brings both of them to the table, Ryan. Now, there are some, and we'll get into this a little bit later with the footwork things. There are some things to improve upon, but just from a playmaking ability, this is a kid that brings the ability to make plays with his arm in structure, with his legs out of structure, with his legs in structure, meaning design runs, but also with his arm out of structure. And I think that's a part of his game that more than anything, I expect to enhance at Notre Dame, because at Duke, once he started to run, everybody just kind of turned around and started blocking. Right. Yeah. What you're going to see at Notre Dame is when he does that, you're going to see guys taking off.
Yes.
And you're going to see him using that ability to get the ball down the field.
We saw a couple of that this year, even with just Sam Hartman, right? I mean, we talk about the Chris Tyree scramble drill, but wasn't it Jaden Greathouse's first touchdown of the year where Hartman broke the pockets to the left and threw it on a little bit of a
Yeah. Well, it might have been a second. It was a second because he hit the post route first. Yeah, I'm kidding. Had 2 touchdowns in his first game. Which one was it? But I think it was the second one, Ryan. But I could be wrong on that. But you're correct. He starts running around. Jaden just, you know, and now what you do is there's different ways to do it. You don't need everyone to be in scramble drill. You can have guys blocking for him. There's different ways to teach it when you have a quarterback like this. When Sam Hartman scrambles, everybody start working, try to get open. Right. And with Riley, you may have a guy, hey, if you're low, you know, if you stay in block, but if you're crossing or if you're high, you come back, you know, whatever. There's all types of different ways you can teach it to where you can still allow him to do that. And I think that's a part of his game you're going to see enhanced this year, Ryan, at Notre Dame, which is something that I'm not faulting Duke for how they did it. That makes sense. I don't want him getting the ball out to other people in that regard. I want him being the one with the football. It'll be a little bit different at Notre Dame. And, you know, but the playmaking aspect is something that you bring to the table. And also, to me, a playmaker like that is an elevator. He's a guy that elevates people around him because you now have to account for him in a way that you never had to account for guys like Sam Hartman and Jack Cohn and some of the different quarterbacks Notre Dame has had. Jimmy Clausen, you know, for as good as he was.
Yeah.
Right. And so now you have to defend him differently, which is going to create more openings. We've seen this with guys in the past, like even a guy like Brandon Wimbush. The way that you had to defend him created opportunities. I'm watching, trying to remember what game it was, right? It might have been the Kansas game. I think it was Duke's second touchdown run. They're at the 6-yard line. They run outside zone, and Riley's just looking at the linebacker, and the linebacker doesn't budge. And then they run outside zone, and he cuts up, and that linebacker eventually gets over and hits him a yard into the end zone.
Yep.
Why did he not make that play? Because he had to hold long enough to make sure Riley wasn't going to keep it.
Oh, Leonard's going to make everyone better around him.
Exactly.
There's no doubt about that, because I mean, people keep talking about this is a good example in the NFL right now. Jalen Hurts, who you talked about earlier with his ability to run the football, he's been banged up a little bit this year, so he hasn't been as good a runner. You know what's happened to the Philadelphia Eagles rushing offense? Hasn't been as good down the stretch of the season so far. It started off really hot. Jalen got banged up. The rushing offense has taken a massive step forward. You know who's going to be better just having Riley Leonard in the run game? The offensive line. They're going to be a whole lot better because he can make the wrong rights. You know who's going to be a lot better? Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Keedron Young if he plays, Jabron Payne. Like, they are going to be better just because there's going to be a linebacker or a safety or an alley defender that is going to have to account for Riley Leonard every single play when they're in the gun and they're running some type of inside zone or some type of look like that, because what's going to happen the first time that they don't honor Riley Leonard, Brian, is that Riley's going to keep it. And Riley's not a guy that, hey, Sam Hartman, you do that and Sam Hartman might get 6 or 7 yards and you're like, cool, man. Awesome. Nice play. Keep it moving, right? Keep the offense rolling. That could be a touchdown against Riley Leonard. That could be a 30-yard gain against Riley Leonard. Those are the explosives. So it's going to make the running game better. It's going to make the offensive line better. And you know what we know Jared Parker wants to do more of in this offense? RPO game. Well, you know what is going to make a whole lot better? The thought of that now that front side alley defender now says, I'm going to come up because I think Riley might keep this ball. And now I hit a little bit of a dagger route right to the middle of the field. That's going to help every part of it.
And it's not even just the safety reading it that way. Sometimes when you're playing a quarterback like him, you have to call it that way, Ryan, where you need to say, we need to have a guy in the alley and a guy in the box because we have to find a way to get someone from the third level to come to the second level to defend all these different things, right? Because what you can do, what I can do as an offensive coordinator, if I have a guy that can do the things that Riley Leonard can do, I can have him handle the defensive end even when it's not even a read, because you're so concerned about that guy. So now I can change my blocking scheme where I don't have to necessarily worry about getting my tight end. So you guys should see it in film this year. Notre Dame would run their inside zone. And every time they ran inside zone, they had to do something to get a body backside to secure that C gap. So either you had a tight end lined up backside, or you'd have a tight end front side and bring him back, or you'd have a second running back coming back, or you'd bring a receiver in motion to chip that guy, whatever. You had to account for that. With Riley Leonard, you don't have to account for that, which means your quarterback can take that guy, which means now you have an extra blocker down the field, blocking second, third level. Or you can use those receivers more now to run more RPOs, because you don't have to worry about getting your tight end involved in blocking backside on inside zone all the time. You still will. You'll still call traditional inside zone, but you can also mix it up to where now, you've got a little RPO action with your tight end as well. Or you can put your tight end front side, and it's almost like you're getting a 12 personnel block out of 11 personnel, because the quarterback now handles what the second tight end would normally do, which is the backside edge. So you as a defensive coach have to make a decision. How do we get that extra hat in the box to account for the quarterback? And it's going to come either from a corner or safety. And so you see Riley Leonard do this a lot at Duke, right? I mean, they run a lot of glance routes, they run post routes. So, they'll do a lot of different RPO stuff that Notre Dame really couldn't do this year because they didn't influence teams that same way. Now, this isn't to say it wouldn't be Gothaldric Estime, but when you look at it and you think about Riley with the dynamic speed that next year's backfield will have, it makes it even more dangerous, because you've got to make a decision right now as a safety. You can't hem and haw and be like, I'm going to try to play both, because not only is your quarterback dynamic enough to hurt you with his legs, Ryan, you also have running backs that if you are a second late reacting to them, they're gone. I mean, that's the fact. I mean, if you're a safety and you're trying to play both, and you're kind of off center and they run in that inside zone, if he gets to that first level of attack and your safety's trying to come from over here, he's not catching Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price. It's not happening. You didn't have that type of dynamic. So now you're not only doing that, but now that guy comes down, he's got to declare. That's where your RPO game behind it comes into play. Where this year's RPO game was just nows and quick outs and hitches. And they'll still run that stuff. There's nothing wrong with that stuff. But now you have the ability
to run that
RPOs.
at Duke a little bit. I mean, they ran it at Duke as well. So
yeah. But you also now add the RPO ability to hit those quick glance routes, maybe a quick post route, quick out cuts, things like that.
We used to call it an arrow route too when I was in high school. Like instead of it wasn't a slant, it was literally like just a straight line to get to right to the middle of the field to like a little bit of an empty hole. You know what I mean? So yeah, there's a lot of different opportunities with a guy like Leonard now in the offense from an RPO perspective.
So there's a lot of different things that you can do, Ryan, to that his legs and his playmaking ability enhances your offense. And that's why so many NFL teams, so many college teams are looking for guys that are playmakers, not just sit in the pocket. I mean, could you imagine what LSU's record would have been this year if they didn't have Jaden Daniels? I mean, it just you look at what Bo Nix did to that offense at Oregon and how he enhanced that offense at Oregon. And that was an offense, Ryan, that wasn't exactly like hurting for, dynamic quarterbacks over the years. But if you look at Oregon, anytime they've ever been good, they've had a guy at quarterback that could do exactly what we're talking about. You look at 2021, the year before Bo Nix got there, that Anthony Brown at quarterback, mobile, not a very mobile. I mean, he's a decent athlete, but he wasn't like a guy that scared you running. He had, 500-600 yards, but he wasn't a guy that really scared you running. But when you add Bo Nix to the mix, who literally you just have to account for him. He brings a completely different dynamic. All of a sudden, your offense goes from like 31 points a game in one year to 38 the next, and then 44 the next, right? I mean, you're seeing an elevation there. And then like we've talked about, the town around him is going to be such that you're just going to have some, like, teams would defend Duke to stop Riley Leonard and the backs.
Yes.
And we talked about this. What was Notre Dame's game plan? Make the receivers beat you. They can't. And that's exactly what they did, Ryan. They said, look, we're gonna have numbers in the box. We're not gonna let him get outside and hurt us. And he still did. But it was basically, if you're gonna beat us, your receivers are gonna have to beat us. And they weren't good enough to do that. Notre Dame, barring disaster between now and and next, will have receivers good enough to beat you if you don't account for them. So it just makes the whole operation more dynamic. And that's how you say, well, how can a quarterback elevate a team that much? These are reasons why, because of how you have to defend a kid like this. This is why you recruit guys like Deuce Knight. This is why you recruit different players. And you just even look at like a guy like DeShone Kizer. A big part of what made him successful that first year as a starter, even though he wasn't a guy going through multiple reads and all that, it was just it was hard to defend that Notre Dame team. You had to worry about Will Fuller and Chris Brown and CJ Prosise out of the backfield. And then, oh, by the way, you've got a quarterback who's 6'4", runs a 4.6, who can who can keep the ball and hurt you with his legs. I would argue that DeShone was obviously bigger than Riley, but Riley's a more dynamic athlete than DeShone was, without question, in my opinion. And so it just adds a completely different element to the table. But Ryan, as you mentioned, this isn't all about him as a runner. That this is more about playmaker. This is a kid that has arm talent. And that's the first thing you talked about when we introduced, IB Nation to Riley Leonard last season. This is a kid that brings a lot of modern passing ability to the table. What does that mean? You want a quick release. You want a kid that can change arm angles, a guy that can make plays, off platform, a guy that can make plays out of structure. Those are two different things. And a guy that has the ability to get the ball into some tougher windows, right? And now tougher windows, I don't mean throwing 95-mile-an-hour fastball between three guys. I mean, you've got an edge coming on. The edge has played your screen effectively. Can you go here and sidearm it and get it around him and make that throw? This kid can do those things. So that's the first thing that stands out to me, Ryan, is he's a kid that I love his release. And what I mean by that is it's fast and compact for a kid who's as tall as he is. Very quick release, but he has a repeatable release point when he changes arm angles. And that can be the most difficult thing. So like for me as a quarterback, I couldn't do that. I could not dip my arm. I could throw here or here. That was it. Because I couldn't provide a consistent, accurate release point with all those different things. Not every quarterback can do that. Jack Cohn couldn't really do that. So this is a kid that can have a very similar release point and throw accurately however he does it.
I'm gonna lose my train of thought for a second here, Brian, because I looked at the chat and Ladarius, who's my guy, I think just said in the chat, did Riley Leonard commit today? And it's like, Ladarius, you're in a show that's called Riley Leonard commits to Notre Dame, my guy. Thank
Yeah.
you for that laugh. I needed that one,
Yes,
man. That
yes,
was
he
great.
did. He did
Yes,
commit
he
to
did.
Notre Dame. Yes,
He did.
yes, he did.
But yeah, Brian, I remember his first game during his sophomore year, right? So 2022. I saw Riley in that game, and I didn't even know he was a dual threat quarterback at that point. I didn't know who Riley Leonard was. Had no idea. He threw a couple, it was like intermediate, deepish, kind of just towards the sideline throws where he had to change his arm angle and he had to throw with a little bit of anticipation. He had to take something off from an arm speed perspective that I was like, oh, that's different, man. Like Duke might have a good one there. And then you add in the fact that he's also a dynamic runner, right? So the baseline of what got me excited about Riley Leonard was fully about his arm talents and his
Right,
ability to throw the football. That was the baseline because I think, again, we need to remember this kid is a quarterback that also has the ability to dice you up in the run game. He can do a lot of things with his legs, obviously, but the thing that first got my attention was he can throw the football and he could do a lot
right,
of great things in the passing game. And two of the throws that I highlighted on Twitter was crumbling pocket, imperfect platform, and he just sidearms this thing out on a, I think it was on a deep out on the one, and the other one was, I think, an RPO where it was just like an RPO outside hitch from the opposite hash, where you're just like, guys, it's not ordinary, right? Like that stuff isn't ordinary. A lot of quarterbacks need to completely turn their fronts, need to get their lower and upper body aligned, and they need to have a good solid platform to make that throw with the anticipation and the arm speed that he does. Riley didn't need it. He crumbling pocket off his back foot, can just sling it out there with easy arm speed and arm angle, and he is just got a lot of talent, man. And that's the baseline for me because if you take away the running ability of Riley, I still think he has a lot of tools to work with, man. I would still be really excited about him. But then you throw in the athleticism, and you're like, okay, well, that's what we call a complete package if he's developed properly.
Ryan, when you look at him too, again, Notre Dame wants a playmaker quarterback, but they have to have a guy that can make plays in the pocket. This staff is confident that this kid can make plays in the pocket, and
Yep.
that's going to be a big part of what he does. But I think you mentioned, and somebody in the chat was talking about, the concern they have is that it took him X amount of time to, Jack Cohn. It took Jack Cohn several games to learn the offense. It took Sam Hartman some time, although I would argue Sam Hartman actually kind of came out pretty well. But that's why the playmaking ability is important, because he can still do damage even if he doesn't necessarily have the whole offense down by game one at Texas A&M, right?
Raises the floor, raises the baseline,
Right,
because until
right,
you're figuring everything out from a pass game perspective, you
right,
still have that running threat that's always going to be there, right? Like it's
right.
just like having something in your holster at all times. Like you have that available when you need it.
A couple other things I like about Riley as a passer. Number one, Ryan, or the next one, Ryan, is I think he throws with really good timing. When he goes
Yeah.
to his progression correctly, he shows me the understanding that I have to throw guys open. What does that
Yes.
mean? Throwing guys open doesn't mean I'm covered and I'm going to throw it and somehow that makes you open. What it means is you get the ball where it needs to get to into the open area, and then the receiver gets to it. That can mean one of two things. Sometimes it means you just get the ball out and let him run underneath it. That's more of a more of a veteran NFL type of thing. What I mean in the
Yeah.
college context is, where a guy's running his route, where the break is going to happen. You don't wait for him to get open, then throw the football. You throw it now. And he did a pretty good job of this at Duke. And at times you'd see the receivers just, I mean, honestly, like they weren't expecting it. Like they weren't prepared for it. In year one, they got better and better and better at it as the year went on. But he's a guy that understands. I mean, there's a play, Ryan, I think against Kansas, where he's reading left. He's reading a one-on-one left, and he has sort of like a triangle concept happening to the right. He reads the one-on-one, comes right back, and he looks. You can see it because the video, Ryan, was coming from behind him, so you could see his head. He sees that they jump the middle route, and he just immediately starts cocking and doesn't even see it yet, and starts looking for the curl, because they had a curl, a middle, and then like a flat triangle, right? So read the bang the one-on-one. Once you see this backer go here, I know this is coming open, and he throws it as the guy's hitting his break, comes back to it wide open, easy 12, 13-yard gain. You'll see him do it on out cuts, corner routes. Now, it's not always, but a lot. He does a really nice job of when he reads it correctly and he's going through his progressions, he gets that ball out on time. That's the difference between a guy catching the ball on the sideline and going out of bounds, or a guy catching the ball near the sideline and turning upfield and running. It can be the difference. There were several times this year when we would, early in the year, where we would praise Sam Hartman for this, where, well, you get that ball out quickly on the break, the guys catch it, they run, they make plays. Chris Tyree had a play like this early in the year. Later in the year, that timing wasn't there, as certain receivers he'd built a connection with weren't in the lineup anymore, and guys were moving around, and he clearly wasn't as comfortable. When he wasn't getting the ball out quicker, they would make catches, but then they'd get knocked out of bounds right away. It's the difference between the two. Riley did a pretty good job of that at Duke, in my opinion, of getting the ball out with good timing, understanding that you don't wait for a guy to make eye contact with you before you throw it. Guy doesn't have to have it. He can have his back to you. Get that ball out there. And he also does a good job too, Ryan, of knowing when I've got to put a little touch on it and let him run underneath it, or when I can zip it and put it on him, and who he could do that with and who he couldn't do that with. Because you could see that evolve. There was a couple guys early in the year that he'd try to throw those quick zips to, and they just were unprepared. Later in the year, with those guys, you'd see him throwing with a little bit more touch to those same players. And that's just getting that relationship with your players. So to me, that's an important part of running this type of offense that Notre Dame's going to run, is you've got to be able to understand throwing with good timing, throwing guys open, and those type of things. And I certainly think Riley brings that to. We saw that on film last year, and we saw it again this year on film before his injury.
And those are kind of requisites to work with David Cutcliffe, because I think we also need to remember that this was not a Mike Elko recruit, right? Like, this was a David Cutcliffe recruit. And David Cutcliffe isn't just recruiting guys that are pure athletes at the position and guys that are just going to be running quarterbacks. Like, he wants those variables to be a part of the offense, obviously structurally, for Duke as well. And I think that is stood with Matt Johns as well, as far as that is a part of the offense that they wanted to. And I think that is obviously still a growth area that Riley can have moving forward. But I agree with you, is that the sense that he does, I think, see the game at a pretty good level already. Like, he sees backside, front side not open. Let's work to the backside quickly. Whether I have a bang 8 backside, or I have a slant, or I have a curl, whatever it is, you have to get your eyes back there when you understand that they're kind of overloading to one side from a coverage perspective. So he has that in him. I think he 100% has it in him. I would have loved, because I think this conversation would be completely different. Well, it would have been very different if he didn't get hurt this year, because he'd probably be working for the NFL draft right now. Like, he'd be starting to prepare that. But I think the perception of him just would be a little bit different from Notre Dame fans for the negative side of the conversation. But certainly, I think that the tools are there from an anticipatory perspective as a thrower as well. I would agree.
The final thing is, Ryan, he does not throw the deep ball a bunch. No. And there's still work to be done with his footwork, which I'll get into with the deep ball. But you go back and watch his 2022 film, the lack of deep ball production is more of a product of the system than him. He can throw the ball down the field. And that's like one of the first games I studied with him was the Duke game. And there was 2 plays in that game, or excuse me, Kansas game, when Kansas game in 2022. There were 2 throws.
You're scouting spring games already. That's crazy, right? Man.
I was breaking down the blue-white game from his freshman year. That's how serious I am. No, I was watching the Kansas game from 2022, and there were 2 throws he made that you're like, that right there, just arm talent-wise, there's not a throw he can't make. Because when you have a guy that's great 20 in, and we've talked about this, Riley throws to me with a lot of zip 20 in. I haven't seen a ton of balls where he just launches one with speed and velocity on a 40-yard corner. They just ropes. They don't throw that route at Duke. But he made 2 throws against 3 throws, against Kansas. One was incomplete, 2 got caught. One was a go route where the receiver did like a double move. So Riley had to kind of pump, and he threw it. It probably traveled. It was over 50 yards from the far hash up the far side. You remember what I'm talking about? Got Duke inside the 10. I think it was their first score of the game, set it up. He had another play where he just kind of flicked a post route about 50-plus yards and hit a guy over the top. And then he had another post route where the guy, I don't think, made the play, but he just flicked it over the top. It was the back of the end zone against Kansas. They broke it up. But it was just an easy – it was actually probably closer to 60 than it was 50, because he threw it from like the minus 48, and the ball got broken up near the back of the end zone. Now, the critique on the play is he waited too long to throw the football. But you saw and he didn't have to just muscle it up. It was a natural throw. And so you saw enough of it to where you can project him to throw the deep ball effectively if they're going to do it more. You think of the post routes they threw this year, the go balls they threw this year. None of those throws, because I thought Sam Hartman threw a great deep ball when he threw it. There's nothing that he physically doesn't have the talent to do deep ball wise. It's not something I'm going to say you're going to come in and throw 90 deep balls next year. I'm not saying that. Sure. But this is a kid to me that certainly has the ability to, we talk about Chris Mitchell and these bigger receivers on the boundary. Your vertical game will not miss a beat this year because Riley Leonard's your quarterback. If anything, I think it enhances it because I do believe you're going to see more single high this year or man against Notre Dame. You're almost going to have to, or quarters, because when you look at the way that teams defended Duke, they never had to really account for the tight end. And they never really had to count for the vertical ball. And so they could defend them a certain way. When you defend Notre Dame that way, you're going to be presented with more risks. And you wonder how our team's going to defend that, because you're going to have big, tall, long, athletic tight ends that can run the seams. We saw Mitchell Evans do that a bunch this year before he got hurt. We know Eli Raridan can run the seams. Cooper Flanagan can run the seams. You didn't have that weapon at Duke. You didn't have the 6'4", 6'5" Deion Colsey and the 6'3" Bo Collins in the boundary at Duke that you could throw go balls to and deep comebacks to. You didn't have the speed outside of the Chris Mitchells and the Cam Williams, those type of players at Duke. And so there's going to be weapons there that you can take better advantage of that to me will say we're going to see more of the go balls this year, or the deep balls this year, not go balls, but deep balls this year. So it was good to go through the film, because that was probably my one question about him, Ryan, because I didn't study the Kansas game before this last month. So when I saw that game, and then there's a couple throws he had against, I believe, Northwestern
this year.
This year. And then he had a couple balls against North Carolina last year. He had a couple deep balls against Carolina last year where you're like, okay, it's there. He's got the tools to do it. They just didn't do it a whole lot.
He threw a beautiful ball. I think it was against Northwestern this year to Jalen Calhoun, which I think was just like I don't know if it was a corner post or if it was just a corner, or a post corner, or if it was just a corner, but either way, it got into that vicinity near the sideline and he just dropped it in. I mean, it was a beautiful throw. So there is obviously upside there. I think that people need to understand that it's always going to be dependent on development from the wide receiver position, just how good Notre Dame is going to be at wide receiver in 2024. But they're going to be a lot more talented than what he had at Duke. Like, there's no doubt about that, guys. Like, I liked it. Jalen Calhoun was a very solid football player for Duke. A nice little slot receiver, guy that can return some kicks. Jaden Moore, the former quarterback, is a solid little player, right? But none of those guys are going to threaten you vertically to be like, oh man, we really need to, we need a bracket here, or we need to really play off a little bit. Like, they're just not those players. They are short underneath separators, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that does limit your offense as far as the ability to push it vertically, the ability to kind of get the dense box out of there a little bit, right? And get less defenders working the short and underneath zones. Like, you need to be able to really unloosen that a little bit. And they weren't able to loosen it at Duke this past year, or the last 2 years, really. They weren't able to do it enough. Notre Dame's going to have a lot more speed and a lot more ability at wide receiver. And as long as developed properly, I think Riley's going to be very happy about that, because I do think that Riley would like to, and it's just me watching his film, I do believe that he would like to create a little bit more explosive plays through the air, but I just don't think it was possible. I mean, for them to be an explosive passing attack at Duke, you had to scheme it up perfect, and you had to work out of structure sometimes with him doing scramble drills. You would have to do those types of things. Notre Dame should naturally just have better wide receivers in 2024, where it's like, Cam, one-on-one coverage, go win. Chris Mitchell, one-on-one coverage, go win. Deion Colsey, one-on-one coverage, go win. Bo Collins, one-on-one coverage, go win. I think you just have more winners in a one-on-one perspective than what he had at Duke. So I do believe that will be a better part of his game in 2024, but certainly it's a part of his game that is a projection at this point, because you just haven't seen it enough.
Yes. Can he be a volume downfield guy? We don't know the answer to that. We've only seen probably 3 games in his entire career where they actually, the Kansas game was one. That's what keep pointing that game. The North Carolina game, I believe, was another, where it was a key part of what they were doing offensively. was attacking down the field. We just didn't see it a whole lot. But I do think the arm talent is there for that. And you mentioned, Ryan, I mean, you got to, if you're Riley, and I remember people said this in the chat at the time because, I think part of it's because how much we praised Riley Leonard just for being the Duke quarterback was, could you imagine Riley Leonard sitting on the other side of the field watching Sam Hartman throw to like Mitchell Evans thinking, man, I would love to have a kid like that at tight end, right? And he's going to have that, plus plenty of talent at the wide receiver position. So certainly there's a lot there. Any other things that we like about his game, Ryan, that you wanted to get into before we talk about the areas where he's going to have to develop, or maybe some concerns we have about his game?
I mean, the other thing I really like is I really do think he's very sturdy in the pocket. I think he's a very strongly put together guy. Because again, he's only about 215 pounds, 212 pounds or so. But being at 6'4", you would kind of look at that and be like, is that a little bit skinny? But he's kind of got that Trevor Lawrence feel to his game in the pocket, where it's like he's a lot sturdier than maybe what his body type would tell you. Like he is a pretty strong player in the pocket. And he's not afraid to sit in there either. Like he's a pretty sturdy and tough kid in the pocket, which I really like, because I think that points to the fact that he is a quarterback. He is a guy that wants to go through reads, and he's a guy that can sit in that pocket. And he's a guy that also, I don't think Notre Dame's had enough of this recently, a guy that when there is a free rusher or there is some pressure, you can kind of shake that off a little bit and you can still extend in the pockets, not as a runner, but be able to step up and break a tackle and keep your eyes downfield. I think he has that to his game as well.
Yeah. Let's talk about some areas, Ryan, where we want to see, I would say areas where his game can still grow and improve. And overall, I think his entire game can still grow and improve. Like when Sam Hartman, it was just about, and Jack Cohn was like, look, this is who they are. Now it's just about getting them comfortable in the offense you're trying to run. Changing Sam's footwork to get him more comfortable, not being in the mesh, things along those lines. But he was what he was from a skill set standpoint as a 6-year senior. Jack Cohn was what he was as I think a 5th-year senior, but in his final season of eligibility. When you look at Riley, there's still a lot of areas where his game is going to continue to grow. And that's my one, and this is something I put on the board. The only thing that gave me any hesitation about taking Riley Leonard, and the thing that gave me serious pause, was the injury. And not so much from the injury being something that is going to be long-term, although toe injuries can scare me a little bit, but it was more about the lost development that came because of the injury. That's the reality. Because a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about is going to be 22 stuff. There's a couple good. I mean, he played well this year. I mean, he used his legs and did a lot of damage against Clemson this year. He did damage against Notre Dame this year with his legs. And he had a really good game against Northwestern throwing the ball this year. They blew out UConn. They didn't really need him to do a whole lot in that game. Clemson obviously has people say, his numbers against ranked teams. Everybody threw the ball poorly against Clemson this year. Everybody threw the ball poorly against Notre Dame this year, right? I mean, I could point to a lot of quarterbacks that struggled to throw the ball against Notre Dame this year. But that just goes to show there are going to be days, Ryan, where he's not on his game throwing the football, but he can make plays with his legs. But overall, his game still has room to improve. That's important. And that's going to be where, Gino Guidugli is going to have a completely different task with Riley Leonard than he did with Sam Hartman, in my opinion.
Right.
The biggest change for Riley is going to be he will have to learn to snap the ball and hand the ball off and run play actions from under center. They will do that.
Yep.
He will have a much easier time doing that than Sam Hartman for no other reason than the athleticism. So he'll get into the play action drop quicker because he's quicker than Sam, but he's also 3 inches taller than Sam and play action. And we talked about that during the season. So that's going to be an adjustment for him. That's really the only scheme / footwork / skill set adjustment he's going to have to make, in my opinion, to the Notre Dame offense is that right there, is being able to hand the ball off and drop back and throw play action under center. Now, some things that we did see on film. First and foremost, Ryan, he is going to have to continue improving his accuracy. When you look at Riley Leonard, here's the thing I see. I see a guy that has a really consistent release point. His release point rarely gets him into trouble. Every quarterback has it. When he gets off, it's his feet. And there's a couple things that he's going to have to improve upon. Sometimes when he's moving around in the pocket, you can tell he kind of has like this weird double hitch where he doesn't set it cleanly, like I'm moving, bam, 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 plant throw, back foot, plant, drive, throw. he'll kind of get this weird thing, and it'll kind of cause his shoulder to come early, and the ball will go down and away on like outcuts and stuff and overs. He'll miss low and away because of that. Don't see it a ton, but see it enough to where you can't miss those opportunities, right? So I have to clean that up a little bit. That'll be something I have to improve upon. But just in a lot of his quick game stuff, Ryan, when he gets his feet, when his feet kind of get a little bit out of rhythm, or he oversteps, or he doesn't properly put that back foot on the target, you'll see him have some misses. And so that, to me, as a coach, if your inaccuracy is due to your upper body, that's a problem for me. That's a lot harder to change. If your accuracy issues that you do have, and they're not extensive, are due to your lower body, that to me as a coach is like, whew, I can fix that in the spring.
Right.
Those are easily correctable. There's people that say, well, he's not a very accurate quarterback. That's just false. Before he got hurt, he was completing 63% of his passes. He completed 63% of his passes last year. And in an offense where he doesn't have the guys that Notre Dame has running around. So, but is he going to be Bo Nix and complete 77% of his passes? No, it's a different offense, and he's not that type of player. There's going to be some throws he's going to miss. You have to live with it, but you need to be able to minimize those times by cleaning up your footwork. That's going to be the first thing that I see from Riley is getting his feet getting in a better rhythm when moving around, looking to throw in the pocket. And it's not when he throws on the run, right? He's actually pretty accurate throwing on the run. It's when he tries to be mobile and then plant and throw is when he kind of get into some trouble. And then at times, if a receiver doesn't get out of his break enough, he doesn't quite have that rhythm, and his feet will kind of rush through the delivery and create some off-target throws. Those are some areas that I want to see Riley improve. And if he can make improvements there, you'll see his accuracy. And when I say accuracy, I'm not talking about completion percentage. I'm talking about ball placement and ability to be more consistent, just getting the ball out there into a catchable zone. You'll see that go up, which then in turn will improve his completion percentage.
Well, I think one thing that when Gino Guidugli got initially hired, I think one thing that he talked about is that he doesn't like to mess with release points, right? Like he doesn't like to mess with arm mechanics. He's more about the lower body and building you up from the floor, right? So yeah, I think most quarterback coaches would rather it be a footwork issue than a release issue or some type of upper body thing. Like you would rather kind of build up from the floor. And Riley Leonard, I think, has a really just good, compact, and easy delivery. Like he really does. The ball comes out quick, but I think that he is also a kid that is a little bit of a long strider to a degree, which I think is also his running style. Like it kind of takes you off guard because he's got a little bit of a longer gait. And I think that he has just the ability or the propensity to overstep at times to your point, right? I think that, and you see that with a lot of taller quarterbacks, right? Guys that have longer legs. Some guys just overstep a little bit, and you have to kind of keep things more compact and kind of level it off a little bit. And then there's other guys like Lamar Jackson, for instance, like his thing early on was that he didn't step enough, right? Like his base was too narrow. So, I mean, it's both ways.
Which is why he would sail balls, right? When Lamar would miss, he would sail balls because when your step is too low. So this is what it means, Ryan. If you overstep, it drives your release point down. If you understep, it drives the release point up. Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Yep. So I think that obviously is very fixable. The biggest thing for me is that just kind of talking about it, another thing that I would like to see is that, Riley, you are a great athlete. You're going to be involved in the quarterback run game a little bit at Notre Dame. I'm sure they're going to ask you to be an extender at times. Absolutely. Because you bring that dynamic to the game. Got to protect yourself a little bit more would probably be something, maybe we'll learn how to slide this offseason a little bit at times, because that's his great asset to him, right? Brian, is he's such a physically just strong athlete, which is great. And in certain situations, going to need that, on a crucial 3rd and 7 where you need to break a tackle to get the first down near the goal line. Like there's going to be opportunities there, but 1st and 10 where maybe you get 8 and you could maybe get the first down, but like also let's save our body from a hit a little bit. I just think being a little bit smarter with some of the hits that he takes would probably be a better idea for him.
He's going to take punishment, Ryan. To your point, there's about 2 there's probably 1 or 2 hits a game. You're like, dude, you did not need to take that.
Which Jaden Daniels needed to learn this year too. It's like, Jaden, chill, man, chill. You don't need that. You don't need that.
You love that though, Ryan, right? You love that as opposed to the guy that's always sliding, like before he should, or dips out of bounds 2 yards short of the first down marker on 3rd down. you want that kind of guy, and you just need to work on kind of pulling it back a little bit. Yes, that is another area, Ryan, where and that's kind of one of the big concerns, right? Is with him is, can you keep him healthy? But that's why Notre Dame is confident that, hey, look, we've got a quarterback room. Like, well, we'll talk about this next. Next. Because I don't want to jump ahead a little bit. Last thing for me, and this is an experiential thing, and this is part of my concern for him missing so much time this year, Ryan, is one area where I'll say this. Two things. Number one, Riley did more full field reads at Duke in 2022 than I would say Sam Hartman probably did his whole career at Wake Forest. That's not a knock on Sam. That's a completely different type of offense. Sam was a kind of a 1-2, bring the cross type of guy. Now he could do more than what Notre Dame did the year before, but it just the nature of the offense. Riley does a lot more read here, come back to here at Duke. Having said that, as a quarterback that has only started, 20 games in his career, and 2 of them were just on a half a leg this past season, that is something that you'd like to see him. He's going to need to continue to improve. That's a little bit of a concern early in the season for Notre Dame. Is that right there? Is he's learning a new offense now? That's going to ask him to make a lot more front to back reads, or at least front to middle reads. It's a little bit more extensive with the pre-snap looks. Now that's an area where I actually think he's going to be a little bit further along than what Sam was, as far as like just the different types of Kevin Johns has been around a long time, right? Like his stuff, they do a lot of different reads, but you're going to need to continue to enhance your ability to go through progressions properly. Riley's issue is at times, well, it's a lot like most quarterbacks. Sometimes he rushes his reads too much, where he goes away from the read too quickly. Show a little bit of patience, keep looking that guy off, and then bring that guy open with your eyes. I'd like to see him get better at using his eyes to manipulate defenders a little bit, which is part of your progression. Sometimes if a guy is covering your zone, you don't want to go away from him. He's locked in on you and he's in that zone. You want to manipulate him and get him leaning somewhere else if you can. And if he doesn't, then you come to your check down. And then also, Ryan, just kind of sometimes he's a little bit slower through his progression at times, where you're like, hey, that's not there. Keep going. Keep going. And like any quarterback, he'll lock in on certain throws, which is fine. I mean, everyone's going to do that from time to time. It's not something that I noticed was an issue where he would just lock in on a guy. When he would lock in on a guy, it was like, I think that's because the read took him there. Yep. So those are things, just the consistency through the progressions, but also knowing when to lock, knowing when to hold and not go away from a read too quickly, which means you got to be able to use your eyes to manipulate a little bit more effectively. Those are some things that I want to see Riley continue to improve and enhance with his game, because you're going to need that in the Notre Dame offense, in my opinion. Sure. It's certainly going to need that in the offense.
Funny enough, the last thing that I was thinking before the show of like something that I would want to improve on is something that we've already talked about a little bit, is I would like to see more chances taken at time from a passing perspective, but also I don't really want to include that like full throttle, because I don't know if that's fully a Riley Leonard thing. You know what I mean? Like just based upon the Duke offense that we've talked about. So I am very curious to see, and I would love to see, do we see more aggressiveness early on in his Notre Dame career? Because Brian, this is like a tough part of quarterback too, in my opinion, is that early on, sometimes quarterbacks need to take some chances because they need to know, 1, what they can do, and 2, what they can't get away with. Right. And I'm curious to see if Riley Leonard has even had that moment yet where he's like, you know what, I can't get away with that, because when did he have the opportunity to show that he could or couldn't get away with it at times at Duke? So I'm interested to see if he takes more chances early on in his career, because we just haven't seen enough of that. But I think that's also just due to the offense and the playmakers you had around him.
Yeah, I mean, turnovers at Duke will kill you. I mean, they will absolutely kill your offense.
Yes.
And that's going to be a big part of the spring is like, look, go out and work on those things in the spring. So that way it's not a fall camp thing. It's come out. I want to see Riley Mills, the first open practice we have in the spring, throw just a bunch of deep balls. Not because I want Notre Dame's offense to be nothing but deep balls, but it's like, that's a part of his game. You need to get that out of him, draw that out of him, is a big part of what you do. So those are different areas, Ryan, where you have to look at Riley Leonard and say, when Gino Guidugli gets his hands on him, these are the areas you first work on. The progression part's going to be natural because that's part of just installing the new system. You're going to have to talk
every
through
day
those.
in reps.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
That'll take care of itself. That's more of an experience thing than anything, Ryan. I mean, and it just comes with reps. But the footwork thing is going to be the big one. That's going to be the part where, where you look at Riley and say, if Gino can impact that, you're going to see a 65 to 67. You could potentially see a 65 to 67% passer. Now, and I think that's going to be an area, maybe even a touch higher, 68, maybe, just because you're going to see so much more screen game, RPO game, I believe, with Riley Leonard than you did with Sam Hartman, which is naturally going to just, if Sam Hartman would have run the same offense this year, but Notre Dame used more RPOs, you can add at least 2 to 3 percentage points on his completion percentage, which was like around 63. Just the nature of the offense. So it's not saying he's a more accurate passer than Sam. It's just different offense. And you'll eliminate some of those. Oh, come on, dude. You can't miss that throw. Right? Because he'll have some of those. He had some of those on film at Duke, but there wasn't a lot of them. But it's like that can be the difference between, do you beat Georgia or do you not beat Georgia? Do you beat Ohio State or do you not beat Ohio State? Right? Those are all parts of it. Absolutely. Or areas we want to see. The last part of this that I want to discuss, Ryan, is the Notre Dame fit and how he fits into what we've seen and what landing him mean what we think it means to what we might see differently. But just as far as what Notre Dame has been, what we know Notre Dame does, how do you see this fit? Things that you believe, even thinking ahead to what the second part will be, Ryan, of what we think this offense is going to look like. What parts of what we've seen that we believe are certainly going to continue moving forward? How does he fit into the Notre Dame offense, and how does he impact the things that we believe are going to be staples of Notre Dame offense? So I want to get your thoughts on that, Ryan. Kind of a two-part type of question there on that one.
Sure. Well, I think for me, the Notre Dame offense is still going to function from in the pocket, right? There's going to be times where you're going to move the pocket, whether it's a rollout to something easy to on the run. And I think that both those implications fit Riley very well because he is a pocket kid at heart, but also he is a guy that structurally can work on the move outside of structure as well. And we saw, the best parts of some things that we saw down the stretch for Notre Dame against like Wake Forest was a lot of the play action game, right? And I think that structurally, if that's something that you are really implementing different types of play action, different looks out of it, ball handling stuff, I think that could fit Riley as well, because that's only going to be strengthened by a run game. That's only going to be structured by a quarterback that can get on the move a little bit and then reset his platform in a different capacity than what he started to play out in. So I think that the ability to work in the pocket, the ability to get the pocket on the move a little bit, the play action game, all of those things I think structurally fit Notre Dame. And then I also saw Notre Dame run a lot of inside zone this year, obviously. And I think that is going to fit Riley Leonard, because all you're going to do out of it now is maybe have a little bit more read off of it and a little bit more of that quarterback run threat.
Yeah. Right. It enhances it. Ryan, I'm glad you went into that, because that's the big thing. I think he enhances the run game. And I don't even mean just from him running. I mean, he enhances the run game because you can now get to inside zone in a lot more different ways now with Riley Leonard as your quarterback. Let me ask you this, and I'm going to ask you this from a defensive standpoint.
Yep.
How difficult is it to defend sort of a tackle-to-tackle run game when you have a quarterback that can run and an offense that utilizes perimeter RPOs? What challenges does that present that maybe we didn't see from Notre Dame this year from an enhancement standpoint, looking at it from the defensive standpoint?
Well, it's deflating for the guys that are inside players, that their responsibility is always that inside run, right? The interior, we used to call them, the interior defensive linemen, and then obviously the linebackers. Like, that's the responsibility to stop that inside run game. The people that it puts in the huge conflict, though, from a run game perspective, are, it used to be a Sam linebacker back in the day. Now we just call them rovers and overhangs and whatever the heck other terminology you want to put on them. But it puts those guys in the conflict, because they are the guys that are going to slow read on the front or the back side, and they are going to determine, I'm going to condense down into the box and then help to fight that inside run game, or I'm going to completely just keep my attention on the quarterback, and there's going to be one less player in the box as well. So it's going to put that guy into conflict a ton. And then from a defensive back perspective, if I'm a safety or if I'm a corner from the RPO perspective, again, you are a pass first football player. But after you read your key and you're like, oh, it looks like run here. And then all of a sudden, Riley Leonard pulls it and throws the football, or keeps it, then pulls it and throw the football. You're putting them into conflict as well at that position. So that's the whole thing with the option, is whether it's a triple option or it's the read option or it's power read or whatever the heck you're running that has an option off of it, RPO game. You're trying to make guys guess wrong at the end of the day. You're trying to make those overhang defenders or the defensive backs, you're trying to make them wrong, or inside linebackers. Even at times you can read those guys as well, obviously. So you're trying to make those guys wrong. So it's all about putting players into conflict and making them guess wrong, because that's why the option is run. And I think that for me, like, that is a very debilitating thing, because if I'm a middle linebacker that is just killing the inside run game, killing it, and then all of a sudden, there's one pull off the backside where Riley Leonard takes a 25, 30 yards, and it had nothing to do with me making a mistake on that play. It's debilitating at times.
Right.
So it's about putting guys in a conflict, but also putting guys into a situation where you feel like you have no answer to stopping this.
The reality is most running teams, you only have to account for 10. You have 11 to account for their 10. When an offense can even it up 11 and 11, that makes it more difficult. You have to rely on just our dudes are better than their dudes. That's what you have to rely on at that point in time. And that's not often the case for Notre Dame. And the other part too, Ryan, as you mentioned, here's the end result of what Ryan's talking about. What can happen when you're defending a quarterback like this is uncertainty.
Yeah.
Because you have to have a lot of different types of calls. You can't just run the same thing every time or it becomes easy to defend. But it creates uncertainty. Oh, am I going here? Am I going here? And what it does is it naturally creates, to me, and what I've seen breaking down film and studying these things with these, it creates more mistakes when you have to defend a team that can do all those things. And we've seen it even with a guy like Brandon Wimbush. I've pointed this out time and time again. How many times did Josh Adams or Dexter Williams or Deion McIntosh or Tony Jones run untouched up the middle? And because you got Brandon. Now, sometimes it's because Quentin Nelson destroyed somebody, or Alex Bars destroyed somebody, or Mike McGlinchey or Sam Mustipher or Robert Hainsey or Tommy Kramer were doing a great job blocking, right? That was obviously part of it. But, you know, I point to the 80-yard touchdown run that Josh Adams had against USC. You want a perfect example of what we're talking about here and what Ryan's talking about. One mistake by one defender is the difference between a 5-yard gain and an 80-yard touchdown. Because one guy who sometimes has to defend the back, sometimes has to defend the quarterback, makes a mistake, and he steps out, and all of a sudden Josh Adams is right up the seam for an untouched 80-yard touchdown. That does not happen this year at Notre Dame. You have to block it perfectly like they did against NC State. You saw a lot of those type of runs from Josh Adams in 2017, where that's not to take anything away from Josh Adams. He read the play, hit it, and ran fast. It's just it really can create mistakes, and one mistake can be you come down too aggressively, you weren't supposed to, and I'm throwing it behind your head to Bo Collins or Deion Colsey or Chris Mitchell or Jaden Greathouse or tight end, right? You bite down too hard, and I've got Jeremiah running a wheel route out of the backfield out of my 21 personnel, and all of a sudden I got a big play. I think back to the Chris Tyree touchdown from Tyler Buckner in 2022 against, was it Toledo? I believe it was Toledo. Where they run a little zone. Tyler starts working outside. It's clearly passed, but the cornerback sees Tyler Buckner getting out of the pocket. He's thinking, I got to go tackle Tyler Buckner. And all of a sudden, he lets Chris Tyree run right by him. Tyler throws it over his head. Easy 55-yard touchdown. Those things don't happen with Jack Cohn or Sam Hartman, a quarterback, and that's not a knock on him. It's just because if Jack Cohn gets outside the pocket, your thought as a corner is what, Ryan? Keep covering. Keep covering. Keep covering. It's not the case when you've got a quarterback like this. And so then if you do keep covering, he can tug and run for 12, 15 yards. And if you come up, he can throw it. So it just creates more potential mistakes by the defense. I would also not be surprised, Ryan, if we look forward to what's going to be, and we'll kind of transition to what we think, what this means for the offense, how we think this offense is going to be different. And I think the first thing we're going to see that's going to be different is a little bit increased tempo. Now, I don't mean that they're going to now all of a sudden go from what they were to like North Carolina under Longo or Oregon under Chip Kelly or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. But there's going to be a need to be more of a normal pace as opposed to the slow down pace that we saw this year. Because when you have a quarterback like this and you're going to be more of a read zone team and an RPO team and those type of things, because those are two things we anticipate seeing more of, you want to run more plays. It benefits you to run more plays for exactly what we were just talking about. The more plays you run, the more opportunities there's mistakes by the other team. Whereas when you're running an offense with a Jack Cohn, with a Sam Hartman, you're more looking for, we need efficiency and perfection as opposed to what you're going to see here. So to me, three big differences that we're going to see: increased tempo. Again, I'm not saying they're going to be up tempo, just increased tempo from where they were. I think we'll see a little less huddling at times than what we've seen now. And you're also going to see more, you're going to see the same run game that we've seen: duo, inside zone, outside zone, counters, same stuff we've seen, but now you're going to see it blocked a little differently, especially from the backside. And then also, Ryan, you're going to see more RPOs as part of this offense.
Yeah.
You don't recruit the players you're recruiting and this quarterback if you're not going to do that. And to me, this is the biggest thing is I just don't think these coaches are stupid. I don't. Sure. And I don't understand why you would recruit a Riley Leonard if you don't plan, and Deuce Knight, because those are the only two quarterbacks this staff has recruited with Jared Parker as the OC. That's it. CJ Carr's already in the class. They love CJ. Doesn't change anything. They love Kenny.
Don't forget about Anthony Rizak, man. Throwing him out, missing him.
But no, that's a fair point, Ryan, because what is Anthony Rizak? He's an athlete.
Well, correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So okay, we'll throw him in there too. We've seen three quarterbacks be recruited for Notre Dame. One's a transfer, one's a scholarship kid, one's a walk-on, a preferred walk-on that they really like. And what can all of them do? Run.
Yeah.
And they all guys can be dynamic in the RPO game. So you just don't recruit that if you're not going to run those things. And if you want to say, well, where's Jared Parker ever run RPOs? He did it at Penn State with Ricky Rain. He did it at Duke with David Cutcliffe when they had Daniel Jones at quarterback. Because people forget, the 2 years that he was at Duke, the quarterbacks, because Daniel Jones got hurt 1 year and he got replaced by Quentin Harris for a couple games. Their quarterbacks ran for over 1,100 yards and had 17 rushing touchdowns in those 2 seasons. And Daniel Jones is not the playmaker with his legs that Riley Leonard is. It's just not.
Sure.
Right? He could run and hurt you with his legs, but he's not as dynamic as Riley. And then at Penn State, they even had over 400 rushing yards with Sean Clifford, and they ran a lot of RPOs there too.
Sneaky so athlete, man.
Right. We have seen him in we have seen him in offenses that do that. I just don't think as a coach, you make the decisions you make to recruit the players you're recruiting if you're going to run what you ran in 2023. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I think this is the beginning of that transition to, and now Kenny Minchie can run that offense. CJ Carr can run that offense. You take some of the quarterback mobility out of it. You're not going to have those guys running as much, but Kenny Minchie can run a read zone and keep it around the backside from time to time. CJ Carr can certainly do that. We see him do that, but they can also be great RPO quarterbacks. And so you may see the quarterback designed runs change a little bit, but the other things to me stick no matter who's at quarterback, whether it's Riley Leonard or Deuce Knight or a Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr. They all fit the transition that we believe they're going to be making offensively. They're still going to be pro style. They're still going to do some certain things, but this is going to be a team, to me, Ryan, that you're going to see more quarterback stuff too with Riley Leonard, more RPOs, and a blocking scheme that's just a little bit more multiple because of what a quarterback like that brings to the table. I think that to me is clear as day that we're going to see those changes to me.
Well, I mean, you would certainly hope so, right? I mean, you already laid out, there's a little bit of proof there that is where they're moving. And I know obviously you've, had conversations with people, close to the program that is always what it sounded like as soon as Jared Parker was going to be named the offensive coordinator of where they wanted to move to. So you're not going to have, Notre Dame is going to have things aligned this year more for what I think their offensive identity wants to be. Now it's about execution and development. Are you able to put a good plan in place, and are you able to put players in a proper position? This is the toys that you want, right? These are the guys that you want. This is the players you want. Now it's about Notre Dame from a staff perspective offensively developing and capitalizing on putting guys in the right position.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, when I look at it, I remember that first conversations I had with you when I had talked to the different sources about this is what ultimately they want to do on offense. Oh yeah, sounds really good. And then we saw a decent amount of it in the spring. I mean, when you think about how they, the spring game downfield, a lot of RPOs and things like that. But then we get to the fall and we really just don't see much of it. We hardly see any of it all. And then we get to the last two games and you see a lot more of it the last, 3 of the last 4 games. Clemson game, they didn't do it. They did a decent amount of it against Pitt. They did a decent amount of this stuff against Wake and against Stanford. Obviously, you're not seeing the quarterback running stuff in there, but you did see a lot more of the RPOs and the different things that they did. So we started to get a little bit of a glimpse of it, but it's like, look, I don't know for a fact they're going to do this, guys. I don't. I haven't sat down with Marcus Freeman or Jared Parker, and they've told me, look, this is what our offense is going to look like now. I'm simply looking at this, like the intel that I got, the conversations I've had over the last year since Jared Parker was hired with different people, and what they envision this team being. And then I look at who they recruit at running back, at tight end, at wide receiver. I mean, think about the 2 tight ends they've landed since Jared Parker's taken over. Jack Larson and James Flanagan. Now, they're different players. They can both block. James Flanagan has a lot more blocking potential, but they're both guys that you're only recruiting because you want to have an impact pass catchers in some regard in the throwing game, right? And then you look at the receivers and the different players that they've gone after at receiver.
Even at tight end, I know he decommitted, but even Nate Roberts is a perfect example of that as well. So
pass catcher first, exactly.
Yep.
You don't do that.
And they made a deep run at Carter Nelson as well. So there's a lot of proof there.
Who's a hybrid receiver tight end guy? You look at running back. The guys that they're looking at running back: Justin Thurman, Daniel Anderson, and I keep wanting to say Kyron Williams because he reminds me so much of Kyron Williams.
Aeneas Williams.
Aeneas Williams. But, all those guys. Now, Aeneas was recruited before Jared got here, but they could have easily pushed him out of the class like they did with Cedric Irvin if he didn't fit what they do. I actually think he fits more into what they want to do now than even the offense he played in before, to be honest with you, Ryan. But you look at all those guys, and they're all guys to me that can be impactful in space in some ways. Daniel Anderson is not going to be a guy that catches 50 balls, but Daniel Anderson to me could be a really good screen back, a guy that's a good check down back, can bring things to the table. Justin Thurman's a guy you want to get into space in different ways. So it all fits a transition away from what we saw into what we heard at the beginning. Like who they've recruited, Ryan, it just makes way more sense that they want to be what we've been told they want to be as opposed to what we've seen. But that also is what makes it a challenge because we've been told these things. We see these very clear, these aren't like these aren't like slight tea leaves or just, these are like ET Reese's Pieces leading you right where you need to go, right? I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me that this is what they want to do, but we have to also look at what they did. And what they did does not really necessarily fit who they're recruiting. So this is what we believe is going to happen. And I think Riley Leonard because with Deuce Knight, if it was just Deuce, say, look, every school recruits kids they probably shouldn't have. I mean, why did Jimbo Fisher recruit Kellen Mond? That kid didn't fit what he normally does. Every coach makes mistakes that way. But when you consider Deuce plus Riley Leonard, to me, it kind of it's like putting that final piece into a puzzle. You're like, oh, that's what that is, right? Like it's not the final piece into a puzzle. It's what I mean is like the piece that, when you're doing a puzzle, I don't know if you've ever done a puzzle, Ryan, but you start to get enough pieces together. We're like, oh, I now think I now know what that is. Right. And so it's like, oh, okay. And now I know where I'm going. And then the rest of it's just like, it's cooking, man. Like you're okay. Now we're good here. And that's what I think these decisions are. And I think Riley Leonard's the final piece of that puzzle is if you're a team that wants to turn into just running the football and ground and pound, why is Riley Leonard, Chris Mitchell, Bo Collins your 3 big offseason targets? Why? You have plenty of depth for the type of offense we saw at times this year of just running the football and being slow and limiting stuff. You don't need 10, 11, 12 receivers for that. You don't need Chris Mitchell for that. You don't need Riley Leonard for that. So to me, it tells me that they're looking to be something different. And
Sure.
that fires me up because I ultimately think that is what is needed for Notre Dame to really become that dynamic offense it needs to be, to not just put up big numbers against the teams that aren't good, which they did impressively this year, but also against the teams that are good. I mean, if you look at Notre Dame was around, I think it was like 40, 45 points per game, something like that, in their 9 wins, Ryan. And I'm talking about just offensive points. I'm actually going to count that up real quick. But those are the things to me when I look at this football team, Ryan, I say, boy, you've got to be that way. You've got to be that way, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think that we are moving past the stone age of, just being able to run the football and winning games that way. Like, that's just not how, in the sense of just strictly running football, no creativity in the passing game, like, that's dead at this point. It is. You need to be able to have a diverse skill set offensively. And I think Riley Leonard, I think Deuce Knight, I think those types of guys, CJ Carr, I think that those guys can bring that ability to an offense where you have to open it up a little bit, man. You can't be completely just a very simplistic and boring approach, because at the end of the day, if you are that way, one, it's going to be hard to continue to recruit at the level you are. It's going to be hard to continue to convince the CJ Cars of the world, the Deuce Knights come the world to come to the program that functions that way, for one. And for two, you're going to put a cap on your team. I think that's the biggest thing for me this year. Is I think there was a little bit of a cap against the bigger games. You could do this against Pitt, you could do this against Wake Forest, but against a really good defense that matters, and against a team that could contend for a Big Ten championship, it could potentially make a playoff run if things roll the right way against Michigan. You need to be able to have the same type of explosive potential against those types of teams. And you can't, upping your upside is one thing, but also raising the floor is another. And I think that you need both of those aspects offensively in order for Notre Dame to take it to the next level.
So I'm looking at these numbers, Ryan, and so this is there's 2 ways to me to evaluate this. Number one is obviously your team numbers, and then 2 is your offensive numbers. And so I if you look at where Notre Dame was in their 9 wins this season, they were at, let me just do the math here real quick. They were at, no, that's not right. Hold on a second. I did it divided by 12. Notre Dame this year, I was correct, averaged 45.8 points per game in their 9 wins. They averaged 41.2 offensive points in those games. But here's the problem. 14 points in a loss to Ohio State, 20 points in a loss to Louisville, including late scores and garbage time, and then 23 points against Clemson. It's not good enough, right? So to me, to be a team that can be dynamic against those teams that you're better than, but also dynamic against the best teams you've got to play, the A&Ms, the USCs, the Louisvilles, the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Michigans, the Alabamas, Texas, teams like that, you've got to be able to score against them as well. And to me, these changes that we have seen personnel-wise, right, we know they're going to have a more dynamic quarterback at Notre Dame next year. We don't know how they're necessarily going to use them. We can project, but we don't know. We know they're trying to recruit more dynamic personnel at running back and wide receiver. We don't know how they're going to use them per se, but we know that they're recruiting them. So when you look at what they've landed from a talent standpoint and what we project to be the changes in emphasis, not overhauls, because you need to overhaul your system. You need to enhance your system. That's what we're asking. We're not saying Notre Dame scrap that offense and go run what Oregon did. No, we're saying there's a lot of good in what you're doing offensively, but you need to enhance it with this, this, and this. And that's what we're talking about. And so if they do that with the talent they're bringing in, this is why you start getting fired up, because I don't have to wait 2 years for the quarterback to figure it out, the young quarterbacks to figure it out. You've got a chance to have a really dynamic, explosive offense next year that can do damage against even the better teams in your schedule if you can coach it up and get it going. And that's what a guy like Riley Leonard brings to the table. He really does. And that's why I think you will see a transition to where they will enhance the offense. And that's what gets me fired up, right?
Absolutely.
So that's going to do it for our breakdown of Riley Leonard. We are going to do a mailbag here. You guys can ask whatever questions you want. You can ask, you can talk about whatever. You can give a comment, whatever the case may be, and we're going to have some fun here real quick. So it's a very good day. If you're, yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm fired up, Ryan. I think this is an example of, will it work? I don't know. just like with Sam Hartman. I didn't know if it was going to work, but Notre Dame took their shot. And they're taking their shot with Riley Leonard. And so what you're getting is, remember what we would complain about under Brian Kelly? There's always this, well, wait till next year mentality. And we were always, every year we were promised, well, it's going to be better next year. And then you get to next year and it's like, well, hold on a second. Now here's this excuse why we can't win. Wait till next year. This is not what Marcus Freeman's mentality is. He's not, well, let's rebuild in 2024 with young, it's no, we've got a shot to win. We've got great young talent. Let's enhance it with some here, and here. And we're going to take our shot. And that's exactly what we're seeing with this type of move. It's a take your shot move. I don't know if it's going to work out or not, but honestly, I don't know that there's a quarterback in the portal that I would have rather had than Riley Leonard. That includes if Michael Pratt would have jumped in. I mean, I would take I know Michael Pratt's a big time NFL prospect. From what I'm told, I don't know that for a fact. Ryan, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, Riley Leonard to me is a guy that, to me is, I would rather have him with what I think Notre Dame is going to do and be than anybody else in the portal. That's my take. So we'll get to the mailbag next, folks. Do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. We would love it if you're listening via podcast platform, whether you're listening on any platform, including Spotify, whatever the case may be. We are on Spotify for those who use Spotify. Give us a 5-star review. Greatly appreciate it. And of course, sign up for the message boards at boardsirishbreakdown.com. We finally found at least a temporary fix for the site. So it is moving a lot faster today, which we're very excited about, but we'll hope to have a permanent fix in place here very, very soon. And so thanks to my team for getting all that taken care of. But we're going to go to the mailbag next, folks, but we appreciate you being with us on the Irish Breakdown podcast. So a lot of fired up people in the show today, Ryan. Of course, there's always going to be some people not happy about it, which I understand. There are some legitimate reasons to say, boy, I wish we would have stayed with the younger quarterbacks. And I've provided them. You know what I mean? Like, I was very much I just want to see them develop the guys that they have. I just want to see that. Right. Yeah. But at the same time, you then start diving into the potential of having a Riley Leonard. You're like, dude, how do you say no to that? That's what it boils down to. But there's a lot of fired up people today, man. And it's going to be fun. Let's get rocking and rolling.
We had a super chat to start us off with Raymond Harton. Says, apologize for last night's short-lived little temper tantrum. LOL. Got a dynamic quarterback today. Go Irish. I don't know what this
appreciate you, Raymond.
Was. But,
Raymond got so we did something on the board last night. We launched a new Champions Lounge, and I said on there, this is a test. I want to see how it does, see what the impact is. And then Raymond got mad because he had to go to 2 boards like it was a permanent thing. I was like, buddy, it's a test. Just relax. And I get it, the frustration with the speed, and especially someone who's on there as much as Raymond. I get it, man. We're all good. We all have those moments. We all get frustrated. You're good, buddy. You're fine. I'm
chill out, Raymond.
Working. Yeah, fine. Glad it's working.
Frank G with the super chat. Thank you, Frank. I love to hear Sam Hartman still helping the program even after his college career has come to an end. I hope the NFL works for him, but if it doesn't, would you bring him back to work for the program?
I mean, if you wanted to, sure. I mean, look, here's the thing. I see some of the responses to Sam not playing the bowl game on Twitter, and some of them like, look, I think he should have played. I'm frustrated he's not playing, but it doesn't. It's one of those things where it's just the world we live in. I don't like it. I don't accept it. It is what it is, right, Ryan? And we can all be disappointed that Sam Hartman wasn't as good as we hoped he would be, or should have been, or could have been. But you also have to be able to balance. Everything requires balance, right? And you can say, hey, he wasn't as good as he needed to be. There were some issues. Some of them were his fault. Some of them were not his fault. But at the end of the day, this is what it comes down to. Sam Hartman gave you everything he had. Maybe it wasn't enough. It just wasn't good enough for whatever reason. But he gave you everything he had. He had the right attitude. And then, of course, things start going down. The same people that loved him started hating on him. It's just the nature of being a sports player or sports figure in any way, shape, form, or fashion. You're always going to have that happen. But the kid gave you everything he had, man. And you may look back and say, gee, I wish he would have made this throw here or that play there. But I don't know that you're going to look back and say, I don't think Sam Hartman was really embraced Notre Dame. He was just here to build his NFL stock. He wasn't here to be committed. He was, people use the word mercenary. No, Sam was committed to Notre Dame and everything it stood for, and gave you everything he got. And he was a great representative. It just didn't work out from a football standpoint, And so I hope that people have a greater appreciation for just forget the quarterback part, just the buy-in the kid had. That says a lot about Notre Dame, and it says a lot about Sam. It really does. And and as we talked about, this is going to, if Riley does what we hoped Sam would do, then you're going to look back and, like I said, Larry Bird may have made the winning shot, but Dennis Johnson got him the ball where it needed to be to hit the winning shot, right? And Sam will get a little bit of an assist on that one for sure. And
yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh no, you can finish your thought. Go ahead.
I'll say, it didn't work out, but I'm gonna give a tip of the cap to Sam Hartman because he came here, he embraced Notre Dame and gave you everything he had. Just didn't work out.
Yeah. I mean, he seems like a great guy. I've never heard anything negative about Sam. I mean, from the Wake Forest program to the Notre Dame program and everything in between, he did everything he should have done, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there was a couple things on the field that we wish would have been a little bit better from this Notre Dame season, obviously. But at the end of the day, was there a fault of from a personal perspective with Sam? No, like he did everything he needed to do. He was named a captain. He never heard anything negative of him and from a locker room perspective. And he has helped Notre Dame in multiple ways outside of just playing football. So good dude, man.
Yep.
K Grant with a big super chat. Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for another great show, guys. Thank you for being here, K Grant.
You are welcome, man. Appreciate you very, very much.
We had another one from Ryan Elliott who said, I've heard a lot of people say, well, it didn't work out for Hartman. Why would it work out for Riley Leonard? They're two completely different quarterbacks. You can't compare this apples to apples. You can't compare this apples to apples. Agree?
Yeah. Agree. Yeah. And look, even if they were the same type of player, Ryan, it doesn't always mean because one guy didn't succeed, the next guy won't succeed. That's not how it works. Yeah. And the other pushback people have had is, well, he's just a 1-year guy and quarterbacks haven't done well in their first year. And I'm like, and they'll point to Bo Nix and Michael Penix. I'm like, you not watching Washington or Oregon last year because they weren't playoff contenders doesn't say anything about how those guys played in year one. I would argue Michael Penix, you could even, well, I would argue, I think you can make an argument that Michael Penix was actually better in his first year than his second year. Certainly statistically, he was a lot better. You could argue that Bo Nix was more dynamic in year one than he was in year two, and I would say Bo Nix was definitely better in year two, but Bo Nix was really good in year one, right? And Bo Nix wasn't anywhere close to being the quarterback at Auburn that Riley Leonard was at Duke. Not even close. Yeah. And so sometimes it's not the quarterback, it's where he is. And so every circumstance is different. It is. I mean, there's plenty of quarterbacks that were really good in their first years. They just didn't have the team around them like they had in year two. And let's not forget, Michael Penix took over a team in the year before he got there, went 4-8 in his first year. They went 11-2. And I think their losses were like 7 and 3 points, something like that. Yeah. And so he clearly had a big impact in year one. And and Riley's walking into a much better situation than Michael Penix walked into, as far as the type of team he's walking into, in my opinion.
Well, it's not apples to apples, and I just also don't like generalizing situations or players. You know what I mean? I think of it like the Ohio State quarterback thing that has been plagued for years of like, oh, Ohio State quarterbacks, the Kansas Kid in the NFL. Then you're like, well, some of you guys that believe that missed on C.J. Stroud, who's probably going to be the rookie of the year this year now, right? So. Yeah, like let's give the guy a chance because he's a very different player. It's a very different situation. It's going to look a lot different. So let's give it a little bit of a shot here. Ryan Elliott said different style of quarterbacks, I should say. Yes, they are very different styles of quarterbacks. You are correct.
we got Shaquille Oatmeal trying to start some stuff with his Chill the F out, Raymond. God, just kidding. Thank you for the super chat. my man, I appreciate you.
Raymond, chill, dude.
Yeah,
chill.
They are long-term IB members, so having a little fun with each other today, which we appreciate.
Tyler Evans with the super chat. Some of your favorite transfer pickups around the NCAA so far.
I think we both like Oregon getting Dylan Gabriel. I don't know that. Yeah, I don't think he's a great player, but I think it's a good fit. That's another school where I'm like, it'd be nice if you can maybe develop your young guys, but that one makes a little bit of sense to me, Ryan. What are some? I'm trying to pull up some portal stuff now because it always helps to be able to kind of be refreshed on some of those pickups. I know DJ Uiagalelei is getting ready to visit Florida State. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw someone say it.
Yeah. So let me go ahead and find some of these guys that have picked other schools today or picked other schools and see if I can be refreshed on some of the guys. Aiden Childs going to Michigan State. I think it's a great pickup for Michigan State.
For Michigan State, yeah.
Yeah. I know whether he'll be the quarterback next year or not, I don't know. But you and I, we'll remind folks in this chat, Ryan and I have talked about Aiden Childs last year when he was in high school because Notre Dame was trying to make a run at him. Very high on him as a player. What do you think about? And I know he hasn't committed yet, but it just seems obvious about London Humphreys going to Georgia. What are your thoughts on that?
I haven't seen him enough. I know that he averaged like 20 yards a catch, and he's like a 6'4" wide receiver. And he's a freshman for Vanderbilt, but I haven't seen him enough to have a real opinion on him yet.
I know you've got Toriano Pride going to Missouri. Helps their secondary. He had some struggles this year at Clemson. But that gives them a boost. Deion Burks to Oklahoma, Ryan. I know you and I both like Deion Burks quite a bit. What are your thoughts on that as a fit to pick up?
Oh, I hated it. I hated it the minute I saw it because I think of Deion Burks is leaving a situation where I think that because he's an NFL kid, man. Like he's 100% an NFL kid. And I think that I wanted him to go to a place where it's a better situation, a better team, and you get featured a little bit, right? And you're going now to Oklahoma where it's good for Oklahoma. I mean, you stockpiled another good wide receiver. That's good for you, right? But from the player perspective, you're going to a situation where you have Nick Anderson, who's coming back. You have Andrel Anthony coming back. You also have Wadoo coming back, right? Jaleel Wadoo. And they're all good players, and they're all our volume getters. And also, because somebody pushed back on me on Twitter, it was like, well, you just plug him into the Drake Stoops role. And I'm just like, I don't want to plug him into the Drake Stoops role. I want to utilize his speed. I don't want to just say you're a slot receiver and that's all you are. Like, I think that really limits Deion Burks. So he has to share volume with 3 other prominent pass catchers already. You're also going to have a first-year starting quarterback in Jackson Arnold there. So there's going to be a little bit of transition there, seemingly, right? And then also, you lost your offensive coordinator this offseason as well. Jeff Levy's down in Mississippi State. So new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, and 3 prominent pass catchers all returning for Oklahoma. I'm just like, I think there may have been better situations from a player perspective for Deion Burks, in my opinion. An underrated one, though, I did like was today Chip Trainum opted for Kentucky. And I actually think that he's going to be a pretty good running back for Kentucky.
I was actually going to bring up Kentucky, Ryan, because they got a nice quarterback and now I always thought Brock Vandegrift was a little overrated from like the 5-star type of thing, but he's got some ability. And that's a system he should do well in, but you got him and Chip Trainum in there. I know another one you like, speaking of the state of Kentucky, Ryan, is Louisville picking up Thor Griffin. Because you sent me film of him last year and we're like, hey, check this guy out. And I was like, that kid can play because he was a teammate of Chris Smith at Harvard. That's a really nice pickup for Louisville, in my opinion, Ryan.
No, it really is because he is 6'2", 320 pounds on the Feldman's freak list. I mean, I honestly thought he was probably going to enter the draft this year, and then obviously he opts to come back and then transfer up. A lot of schools wanted him, man. I know Oklahoma made a big run at Thor Griffith. Louisville, obviously, with the resources they have as well. Just can't get enough good quality penetration style defensive tackles in today's game, man. Like, you could always use those types of guys. Harvard graduate, so now he's going down to Louisville, Kentucky for his final year. I love it for Louisville. I thought it was a little bit of a weird fit because he's a New Hampshire kid that went to Harvard and now he's going down to Louisville, Kentucky. But I texted him yesterday and I was like, hey, man, you want to send me back some bourbon? You're more than welcome now that you're down in Kentucky. So obviously joking there, but I think that that's a big get for Louisville. And I'm interested to see how they deploy Thor because they had a pretty good defense this year for the most part. I know it faded a little bit down the stretch, but for the most part, they had a really good defense. And I think that he'll be able to help that, obviously.
No, I forgot. Also, Kentucky got Raymond Cottrell, the freshman receiver. So they got yes. Now he's going to need to get up to speed. No, they only caught 1 pass this year, but as I've said a million times, I don't care about experience at receiver nearly as much as any other position. He'll help them. He'll improve their receiving core. Will he be a stud not year 1? I don't know, but he's going to be a good player for them, in my opinion. Yeah. Another one that I like too, Ryan, I guess I shouldn't say that it's not a done deal yet. Actually, I'll just wait till it actually happens before we go there. Chris Paul, linebacker from Arkansas, going to Ole Miss. It's a nice pickup, in my opinion, for Ole Miss from what I've seen of him. But one that I also like too, and it's a bummer for Notre Dame, but Braylon James going to TCU is a really good pickup for TCU, in my opinion. Because you talk about the kid that went to the pros this year, just a pure vertical player.
Johnson. Yeah.
That's exactly what Braylon is. I mean, that's exactly the role that Braylon will play for them. So that's a nice pickup for them as well.
Yeah,
it's a nice pickup for them.
There's a lot that have still obviously that we'll be declaring over the next week or so, and we'll get a lot more conversation about that when it happens, obviously.
And I know I saw your boy that does all the graphics talking about all these great offensive line that Colorado. I'm being sarcastic. That Colorado's putting together, and I'm like, there's only really one kid that I've seen of the transfers that I think can play at that level. I think the kid from Houston's not a bad player. I think he's pretty decent.
He didn't even start for Houston this year, though. He transferred from somewhere else and then was like a backup, though. So
I think he's a nice player. But like those are a bunch of guys. The center from UConn's he's a nice, tough player, but he's really small. He's a good player, but he's really small. He's like 270 pounds. And it's just like, dude, you're going to have to try to – guys, it is not as easy as you think to take 5 offensive linemen and put them all together and form a good offensive line. That's a lot harder. That's a lot harder than people think. A lot harder.
You got 5 offensive linemen this offseason. The best one is a true freshman for any position offensive line that usually experience and development helps a lot more. So I don't think it's gonna be better than it was this year because it was awful this year, but I don't know if it's gonna be a ton better than it was last year.
Zeke Crow going to NC State. They're giving him a veteran. Yeah, that's fine.
Replace Dylan McMahon at center, which would be good for them. So
sure. Looking through a couple others, Ryan. Was glad to see Joey Tonona. I really hope he's passed all his medical issues. That would be phenomenal to see Joey Tonona play again. And if he can get back to form, it's been a couple years since he's played. But if Joey Tonona can get back to form, that's a great pickup for Purdue. I liked him a lot coming out of high school. He had the very unfortunate injury that he got from a car accident. But was really happy to see him I want to give football another shot. Because obviously he would have had to clear some medical stuff, in my opinion. I did want to ask you, if we can, Ryan, before we move on from this topic. There were some quarterback commitments in the last week that I thought, and another one we anticipate coming up that I thought were really intriguing. And I wanted to ask you about this one especially, but a couple others, if you don't mind me asking about. Sure. Number one is Taylon Green, the kid from Boise State, going to Arkansas. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, he's very talented. I mean, he's 6'3", 230 and can run, and he's got a really strong arm. He's an underdeveloped kid, obviously, who had a lot of signs as a freshman 2 years ago, but then as a sophomore, I think he was a redshirt sophomore. He was kind of banged up, and that offense wasn't really clicking early on, and I think he did a little bit better down the stretch when he came back. But the fit with Bobby Petrino's interesting-ish, I guess, right? Because, I mean, Bobby Petrino has mostly been a pro style, well, not a pro style, but he's mostly been a pocket quarterback guy, right? I mean, he had Lamar Jackson for a couple years, but aside from that, he's had the Ryan Mallett's, the Brian Brohms, the true pocket kids. So I'm interested to see how if he uses him similar-ish to how they use Lamar to a degree, or if they assimilate, or if Taylon's coming in to kind of build from the ground up. But he's certainly talented, and Bobby Petrino is a good offensive mind, obviously. So I think they'll get the most out of him probably, but he's definitely a kid that needs some development. There's no doubt about that.
He made himself a hot commodity with how he played against UNLV in the Mountain West title game. Yeah, he was throwing the ball down the field. He was making plays with his legs. Like, people are looking at that and ignoring the fact that was he benched or just hurt half the year, where he just I think he was benched, and just kind of ignoring some of that. But like you said though, Ryan, there's a lot of tools to work with there. Another one that I wanted to ask you about. I have to do it, Ryan. I'm sorry. Tyler Shuck is going to Louisville for a 7th season. So they replaced one old quarterback who hadn't been very good at other places with a even older quarterback who hasn't been that good at other places. What are your thoughts on Tyler Shuck going to Louisville?
I think Tyler Shuck's a lot more talented than Jack Plummer, but the problem is that Tyler Shuck has also been injured every place he's been, which is why he's
got his 7th year. Exactly.
So I was out. I remember when Tyler Shuck had some good positive plays early on in his Oregon career, and I was just like, cool, man, awesome. But I thought that's when his name was probably pronounced Show or something, and then I found his name was pronounced Shuck, and I'm like, all right, well, you're not.
For all you listening that don't know about Tyler Shuck, his name is pronounced Shuck, right? Like Shuck, correct, Ryan?
Yeah.
Like his name is spelled Shough.
Yep. So it looks like show or
So
shuff or
yes,
show or something like that, Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Max Johnson in North Carolina, that's a big drop off from Drake May to Max Johnson, Ryan. That's a big
Well,
drop
you
off.
have a tall quarterback replacing a tall quarterback. Other than that, there's
Yeah,
some different
that's
different
yes.
variables there, but yeah.
I gotta think they're not bringing him in to just be the guy. I have to think they're bringing him in as insurance in case Connor Harrell's not ready. I just have to
Mm.
think that's what they're doing. Which, if that's the case, that actually kind of makes some sense. Like, look, North Carolina's not going to be able to go get Riley Leonard or a Cameron Ward or a guy like that. Bring a guy like Max Johnson in for a year. And if
Yeah.
Connor Harrell's ready, you play Connor Harrell. That's the freshman they had from Alabama that I loved coming out of high school. And if he's not ready right away, then you start Max Johnson. And if he gets ready at some point in time, you can replace it. But that's going to be a big drop off. But they need to get some defensive guys in the portal. That's where
Max
they need.
Johnson's like the new Jack Plummer, man. He's been
I know.
everywhere. He's
It is
been
wild.
everywhere.
It really is wild. What do you think about the New Hampshire kid? I know you're familiar with him. I believe you're familiar with him, Ryan. The kid that's going to he's transferring to Minnesota.
Minnesota.
I believe.
Yeah. So he number 16. His name's escaping me for some reason, but I've watched a lot of film on him actually because they actually have a running back named Dylan Laub that's going to the Senior Bowl. And Max Brosmer is his name. His name just came to me. So Brosmer, 6'2", 217. He was up for the Walter Payton Award on the FCS level, which is the Heisman Trophy on the level for FCS football. He's good, man. He's really good. I mean, he torched Central Michigan. He threw for 500 yards against Central Michigan.
And that running back went off in that game too. We were watching film of that game.
300 yards receiving or something like that.
Because I think it was the week before they played Notre Dame, right?
Yeah. Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was holy.
I like Brosmer. He's a tough kid, solid athlete, nothing special, but he can also throw from some different arm angles. He's a pretty talented passer overall. Like, he doesn't have a bazooka for an arm, but he can throw the ball with touch, can throw the ball with anticipation. I like Brosmer. I think he's very tough. He's definitely an upgrade over the Greek kid that was playing quarterback for Minnesota because he was one of the worst players. I know that we bag on Spencer Petras all the time, but the Kakalakis kid or whatever the heck you pronounce his name from Minnesota, he might have been worse. He may have been worse. He was very
strong
bad.
arm for no reason whatsoever.
Yes.
I mean, just
horrible. Player.
Oh my goodness.
Horrible.
The kid that you're talking about, Ryan, Max Brosmer, the last 2 years has passed for just over 6,600 yards. The last 2 years has passed for 56 touchdowns and only 14 picks the last couple years. So, like you said, talented player, very talented player. And comes from a good program. The New Hampshire's a good program. It is. Yeah. It's a good football program.
He's originally a Georgia. I think he's a Georgia kid originally.
He is from Roswell. You are correct. Yeah. He had two games this year with 4 touchdown passes, another game with 5. So again, talented quarterback, very talented quarterback, and not immobile either, Ryan. I mean, he had 5 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he can move the chains with his legs as well. So, and then the last one, 2 of them I wanted to ask you about of guys that have not decided yet, but it sounds like this is where they're leaning. And that is Kyle McCord to Nebraska and DJ Uiagalelei to Florida State. That's all the rumblings are that those 2 are projected there. I'll just quickly say this about Kyle McCord. I think Kyle McCord got a little bit of a too much blame at Ohio State this year. But he's just kind of a solid game manager type of quarterback. But Kyle McCord over Jeff Sims is a huge upgrade for Nebraska, in my opinion. Huge upgrade. He's not a savior because he's not that guy. Yeah. But the way they play defense and the way their line played this year, Ryan, I think you can put a competent quarterback out there. They're going to win 7-8 games next year, in my opinion, if they can keep that team together.
Well, or the worst case is that he's going to keep the seat warm for Dylan Raiola, who apparently is going to flip to Nebraska. So
that's the best case for them. You know what I mean? But no, I mean, not for Kyle. But but that's what you need to do, right? I mean, you've got to get quarterback fixed. Matt Rule has to get quarterback fixed. And we saw in his last year at Nebraska, he wants to be able to throw the football, not throw it 50 times a game. But what was that kid's name? The kid that transferred, Connor Brewer. That kid, between him and the backup, because Connor got knocked down, they threw for over 3,500 yards that year, Ryan, the year that they played in the Big 12 title game. Actually won the Big 12 title, I believe, that year, correct? No, they didn't. Oklahoma did. They lost to Oklahoma in a close game, and then Oklahoma went to the playoff, and then they went and played the Sugar Bowl against Georgia, I believe, or Georgia. But they threw the ball over 3,500 yards that year. He doesn't want to be an air it out kind of guy, but he wants to be able to throw the football. And I think Kyle McCord can do the things that he's asked him to do. What about the next one, DJ? I don't see that. I don't see the fit. I don't know. I don't know that
could be worse, man. You could be rolling with Tate Rodemaker and Brock Lenz, so I guess it's better than that. I mean, I unfortunately watched both of those quarterbacks down the stretch, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not a big DJU fan, but like he's probably better than that. So
certainly. But compare it to the kid that they're losing, it's a different animal. It's
very different player.
DJ is what he is. He's better than what he was at Clemson. I think he did some nice things for Oregon State this year. You're not going to have Johnny Wilson. He's already declared. I would assume Keon's going to declare at some point in time as well, Ryan.
If Keon Coleman
not going to declare
school, no, he is going to declare. If he goes back to school, I'll eat a shoe live on this podcast. So
I really hope he goes pro now because I don't want to have to watch you do that.
He's going to go pro. Trust me. Yeah, he's going to go pro. Yeah.
Couple super stickers. One from Michael Mahoney. Michael, thank you very, very much. And Scott Gibbs. Scott, haven't seen you post on the chat in a while. Good to see you, buddy. Thank you for the super chat. Super sticker. We appreciate that. And this is the last super chat, Ryan, and we're going to get back to the top.
Austin O'Donnell. Thank you so much, Austin. Finally made a live show and able to drop some support for the best crew out there. You guys rock. How confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10 of Xavier Watts and or Riley Mills returning for next year?
Well, right now, I would say scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably at like a 8 that they both come back right now is where I'm at. I don't believe full decisions have been made for either, but it's certainly trending in a direction that right now they're both going to come back in our view. I know, Ryan, you've had some intel that speaks about Riley Mills and that we think he's leaning towards coming back. I've been able to gather some intel on Xavier. And again, I think the fact that Xavier's playing in the bowl game and the fact that Xavier is in the video showing, Riley Leonard around and those type of things, it's all leaning that direction. Now, he could have someone convince him that, dude, you're going to be a first-round pick. But I think and from talking to sources, the reasons that Xavier's coming back are exactly why Xavier Watts has been successful. He gets the big picture. And he understands that his game, unlike because this is something I said to somebody close to him that asked me my opinion. I said, look, normally I don't advise guys to come back for fifth years as skill players. Or like I don't advise it because I don't advise anything. I don't normally see guys come back for fifth years as skill players and make big jumps and be first round NFL draft picks. What makes Xavier unique is because he's not a fifth year safety. He's really just a third year safety. And so it's a little bit of they're unlike most fifth year guys who just kind of are what they are. Just like Cam Hart had room to get even better than he was in 2022 because he was still developing as a corner. And so he went from senior to fifth year. He was a good player last year to a great player, in my opinion, this year. And I think Xavier Watts can make a similar jump because, like Cam, he was a guy that made a position switch into his Notre Dame career. Not when he showed up at Notre Dame, but after his Notre Dame career already started. So, and I think Xavier understands that. And he understands that as a team, like, look, I didn't go through all this not to compete for a title, right? But more so, even just for his own development, I think he understands there's still a lot he can improve upon and learn, and that being a first-team All-American, being an Nagurski Award winner, doesn't mean a hill of beans to an NFL team. It's going to be about where my game is and those type of things. And it's just another reason why I love that kid, because whatever decision he makes, Ryan, he really thought through this process. And that's when you respect the kid's decision either way, is when he thought through all of it, all pros, all cons, what's the good, what's the bad, what could help me coming back, what could help me going out now, and had a very thoughtful process. And as of now, I think it's going to lend to him coming back. But again, I don't believe a final decision has been made, like 100%, no doubt about it, I'm coming back, has necessarily been made by both of them, at least as of this weekend. And anyway.
Yeah, and I'll have a little bit more to say on the Riley Mills kind of, decision-making process when everything is finalized. But yes, I would agree that it is definitely leaning towards both returning as of today.
That's huge for Notre Dame too, Ryan. You know, because what do we always say? You got to be good up the middle. And
especially
up the middle next
Cross
year,
already coming back too.
If Cross and Mills come back, plus the depth, Rubio, Onye, Heinisch, the Houston, Mookum, all those guys coming back. And then you've got talent at linebacker, although they'll be young. But if you are going to be young at linebacker, although it's not a given, because I could see Jack Kaiser moving inside and starting a will or whatever next year. But even if you are young at Mike linebacker, you're going to have experience behind him and experience in front of him. And that's important. That's very important.
Agree. Michael Johnson with the question, was Deshaun Kaiser the last starting quarterback that was over 6'3" to start at Notre Dame? And does this mean we can expect more RPOs this year with Riley Leonard at quarterback? I think Jack Cohn was 6'3" and an eighth, if I remember correctly. He was a hair over 6'3".
He measured. You are correct, Ryan. He actually measured in at the Notre Dame's pro day at 6'3.1, and which is an eighth, correct?
Yep.
And 217
Everything's on an eighth scale on the NFL side of things. So,
So I just looked at the pro day results, and that's where he was 6'3" and an eighth. So Jack Cohn was the last guy that was over 6'3" to start at Notre Dame. And I think Michael certainly, and now Michael's question came out way before we broke down how the offense is going to change. Sure. And so obviously we talked a lot about that, Michael, but I don't think, I still don't, I'm not someone who believes you can't run RPOs with shorter quarterbacks. I mean, Bryce Young ran a mess of RPOs at Alabama. Kyler Murray ran a mess of RPOs at Oklahoma. There are some things you may not want to do in the RPO game with a shorter quarterback, but you can still certainly do that. But I'm not going to say height doesn't help, but it's not the detriment that where you just can't do it the way that I think some think that it is.
Right. JM, do you think us getting a transfer quarterback every year is holding back the development of the offense with a lack of familiarity and having no continuity?
No, because I think the offense would have been worse each of the last 2 years that they didn't have a transfer quarterback. I mean, you'd have had redshirt freshman Drew Pine and true freshman Tyler Buckner playing quarterback in 2021 if Jack Cohn doesn't transfer in. You're not going 11-1. Even against that schedule, you're not going 11-1 with that. This season, you're probably worse than 9-3 if you don't bring in Sam Hartman. Because they'd had Tyler Buckner. Okay, but does Tyler Buckner play more than 3 games? Do we know that he could have played more than 3 games? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe Tyler could have been healthy all year and helped you out, and maybe could have, but you couldn't take that chance. So I don't think it's holding back the offense at all. I think the lack of familiarity thing is a little bit overstated, in my opinion. Especially for guys that enroll mid-year, and I believe Riley Mills will be enrolling mid-year. Ryan, will he be here in the spring? Do you know for a fact? Riley Leonard, sorry. Do you know if he'll be here for a fact in the spring?
I believe so, but I'll get updated on that. Yeah.
I could see a scenario where maybe he's like finishes up school at Duke or something. I'm not sure, but I'd have to find that out. Because you did find out he is not graduating in December, correct?
He's not graduating in December.
So he will be an undergrad.
Yep.
So I don't think it's holding it back. I mean, guys, look, for all the issues we had with Sam Hartman or the offense, this team is scoring 39 points a game this year, right? Like they're second or third all time right now going to the bowl game in yards per play. There's a lot of good things in this offense this year that we ignore because we focus on the games where they didn't play well. As the great loose emoji told me, the only big games that Notre Dame ever plays are games they lose. Speaking of, how fans perceive it. And I get it. They got to get better in those games. But it doesn't mean that this offense sucked all year. I think the offense was very good at times. It needs to get a lot better, but it wouldn't have been as good if you don't have Sam Hartman. Now you say, okay, now is it stunting future development? Yes, if you keep doing it. But at the same time, you don't have a chance to develop the future players if you don't have a job. And that's really what it comes down to for some of these coaches. But in this instance, as someone who prefers to develop your own players, sometimes there's just an option out there that you just can't ignore. And you can't just say, hey, sorry, we're going to develop it. Take a chance. You've got to go make that run. And I think Riley Leonard is that kind of player. Next year, say, well, the fear is, Ryan, the genuine fear is it's very valid. Well, are we now just stuck in this cycle? So if Riley doesn't get hurt next year, we don't have experience, you got to go in the portal again. Potentially, that's a concern. But the reason I don't think that happens is because redshirt sophomore Steve Angeli, redshirt freshman Kenny Minchie, and true freshman CJ Carr is good, but some concern. Redshirt sophomore Kenny Minchie, redshirt junior Steve Angeli, redshirt sophomore Kenny Minchie, redshirt freshman CJ Carr and true freshman Deuce Knight is a much more dynamic group that you feel better about, and they've all got a year of experience. CJ and Kenny have a year of experience. And if Steve transfers or if Kenny transfers, you still have redshirt junior Steve Angeli with redshirt freshman CJ Carr and true freshman Deuce Knight, or redshirt sophomore Kenny Minchie, redshirt freshman CJ Carr and Deuce Knight. Either way, I'm going to be a lot more comfortable in 2025. Plus, the pieces around the quarterback are going to be a lot more experienced in 2025 than now, where you throw one of these young quarterbacks in behind what we don't know, this unproven offensive line, you can hurt their development in that regard too. Sometimes you can stunt development by playing a guy too soon. We've also seen that.
Yeah.
And so it's not an easy answer. Yeah. I've struggled with it. I've been back and forth on it. Ryan was a pro transfer guy, but also understood. And you understand, but you got these talented kids you got to develop as well. I just also don't think the development means that not starting doesn't mean you can't develop guys.
Yep.
Right. I mean, Kenny Minchie can get plenty of development next year, and CJ Carr can get plenty of development next year as non-starters. That's part of the development process.
Yep.
And so that's what they're going to have to know. That's the task for Gino Guidugli. Yes, you got to get Riley Leonard ready to play at a high level, but you need to make sure you're getting these talented young kids ready to go too, whether their number's called next year if Riley gets hurt or doesn't play well, or in 2025 when Riley's headed to the NFL.
Exactly.
That's going to be his task.
And you could conceivably, even if you go into let's say 2025, it's Kenny Minchie's show. You could still have Kenny for 3 years as a starter, guys. I feel like we're acting like these kids are all going to be like redshirt juniors this year, where it's just like the window's closing. It's like, no, the window's just kind of opening, right? So yeah, it needs to be reversed at some point. And I would just like to say, because I just want to make sure that we're on the same page here in the chat. Someone I think has said in the chat, Brian, just to kind of clear something up. No, we did not say that he will not enroll in January.
Correct.
Riley Leonard speaking. We said, and this is a fact, is that he is not going to be a graduate in December.
Right.
So he can still enroll at Notre Dame. He would just enroll as an undergrad if he comes here in January. That was what
I said was, I don't know that he's an early enrollee. Right. And I'm not going to tell you guys something is true that I don't know for a fact. I haven't been told. I haven't asked. I would assume he is. I haven't been told he's not going to be. So.
Yeah.
But I'm just being open with you guys that I have not been definitively told he'll be here in the spring. And until I know that, I'm not going to tell you that he is for sure going to be there.
Right.
But I would assume so.
Sure.
But until we get a definitive word, then, I can't tell you.
Raymond again. Raymond, chill out, man. Gideon Rosa. When Riley Leonard and CJ Carr are on campus in a quarterback room with Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchie, CJ Carr, and Riley Leonard, who is the most talented? I mean, just God-given. Like if we're talking about athleticism, arm strength, like that, I would say Riley Leonard is the most talented of that group.
How would you rank those just physical talent? Because I would go Riley, Kenny, CJ, and Steve. Physical talent, just physical talent. Because CJ's greatness to me comes from things that aren't necessarily measured by physical skills. It's more here, and he's incredibly intelligent and all those type of feel for the game and all that kind of stuff.
I would go the same. I think just kind of looking at it. Yeah. I think Kenny's got some really nice raw tools. So yeah, I would go Riley, Kenny, CJ, and Steve as well. We had God Country Notre Dame Barbecue. I don't get the angst from so many Notre Dame fans about this pickup. This kid is a freaking dude. He's not Sam Hartman, and he's not Jack Cohn. He is Riley freaking Leonard, and he is a difference maker. Watch the film.
Yeah. Can be. He can be. Kenny Moore also had a comment about it as well. A couple of these, I just wanted to get some comments of people fired up about it.
Kenny said he is a dude. Notre Dame is much better team today than they were yesterday. Hartman raised Notre Dame's floor. Riley raises their ceiling. I think this is big. I agree 100% with that comment, Kenny.
Mm-hmm.
I think he does raise the ceiling. We had Jen.
I love the way he put that, though, Ryan. I just love the way he put that. Like, Sam Hartman absolutely raised the floor of this Notre Dame football team. And, if you didn't have Sam Hartman, it could have been worse. You could have lost to Duke. You might have lost to USC. I mean, there's all types of games you could look at and say, maybe this game doesn't go the way that maybe you lose to NC State because they don't make some of those plays he made in the second quarter and third quarter to win that football game. You don't know that.
Yeah.
But as he said, Riley Leonard raises the ceiling quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a bit.
Agreed.
There's no doubt.
We had John Flanagan. John says, yeah, Riley Leonard definitely provides the athleticism necessarily when we likely have an offensive line that needs more practice, training, time together. Agree 100% on that. Yep.
Yep.
We talked about that in the opening too, John, about, there's how do you make guys around you better? You have the athleticism and the diverse skill set that Riley Leonard brings can make guys a lot better. So agreed.
Mm-hmm.
We
All right, let's go to the
yep.
Yeah.
Cody Vaughn, let's go. Huge pickup. Now we won't have to play him anywhere else either. That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would have sucked if you went to Texas A&M, wouldn't
Oh
it have?
yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that really sucked. He said, "Dude has legit NFL talent." I agree.
Yes, he does. Oh, he has 100% has NFL talent.
Well,
Brian
and I want
Hockney.
to make sure. I want to make sure I point this out too, because there's some people that'll say, "Well, you're just saying this because Notre Dame got him." And my response to that is just go listen to the shows Ryan and I did leading up to the Duke game this year. We had no idea that he was going to come to Notre Dame before that game. And go listen to what comments we made about him last year and over the summer when we were talking about just Duke overall. And I mean, so this is a kid that we've been and I'm high on him because Ryan, I think it was a Temple game. You're like, dude, you got to watch Riley Leonard. Yeah. And I'm like, who's Riley Leonard? You know what I mean? He was like, I just watched you because I think you were just breaking down film. Like you were probably watching somebody else.
Oh no, I was just watching them live. I was like, what the heck?
Okay, you watching the game live?
Kid?
That's right. You're just outside of Philly, right? But yeah, I mean, and he's like, dude, you got to watch this kid play. And I'm like, I don't even know who this kid is. Yeah. And then you pop into film, you're like, oh, holy moly, this kid can ball. And so yeah, we've been talking about Riley. We could be wrong, but it's because of what we see, not if he would have gone somewhere else, I'm like, holy, that's a great pickup for that team. No doubt about it.
We have Brian Hockney who says, will we still go after another wide receiver in the transfer portal? Do we have any names that we are looking at?
Well, I don't want to put too many names out there just because that's kind of the communication we've had and we've been asked to do, but there's definitely some guys that are still on their radar. There's certainly some guys on their radar. And as Ryan said, if you want to know who the names are without us telling you, go look at who Riley Leonard follows on Instagram and you'll get a sense of who that is. Now, here's the thing, Ryan, they're not going to take a third receiver just to take a third receiver. They're not looking for a body. There's some and you and I talked about this last week. There's some impact. This is a really good receiver portal class, like really good receiver portal class. And Notre Dame's gotten two pretty good ones already. But there's a couple guys on the board that you're like, if they get that guy, it changes some things. It certainly changes some things. No doubt about it.
Patrick Ball, who says, not sure if this was ever mentioned, but seems classy all around for Sam Hartman to announce yesterday and then Riley Leonard today. Each guy has his moment. Seems class all around. It's also tactical, right? Like as far as like if I'm Notre Dame and their side of things from an exposure perspective, I don't want to clog up two big stories into a small window. I want to spread that out a little bit. So yeah, Patrick, I think you give both players their moments and you also get a little bit more notoriety for your program as well. So I think it's beneficial for both sides.
They're orchestrating all this stuff, guys. I mean, look, the video that was put together, all of it. This is all planned out the way it's going down. It's all planned out.
We had Joe Papiti who says, this is a very honest question. I'm glad that it's honest. Based on our schedule coming up, how many extra wins does Riley Leonard get us?
I mean, compared to who? Would it be like whoever the starting quarterback was, Steve Angeli? I mean,
I think a more fair question, Joe, and I think someone asked it during the show would be, how many more games do they win this year, right? Because we have something to actually compare it to. And I would say this, and I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I think Notre Dame beats Ohio State if they have Riley Leonard instead of Sam Hartman.
I've flat out said that, Ryan, because they don't get stopped on 2 4th and 1s. That right there changes the game.
And then at the end of the game too, it even gives you more options. Like Aldrich's out of the game. Let's run Riley to close the game out.
Perfect example. That last play that the quarterback that the DN blew up. He can't charge that hard off the edge with a guy like Riley Leonard at quarterback. You just can't. And so you are correct. No, would they have beat Clemson? I don't know, but here's the deal. Riley, at some point in time in those final 6 drives where they had 6 possessions with a chance to tie the game in the second half, 6. You have to think based on what he did against Clemson that at some point in time he breaks one.
Yeah.
and gets the offense sparked, and you just feel that way. And this isn't a knock on Sam. Sam's situation was if the offense around him wasn't thriving, it was going to be harder for a guy like Sam to carry a team. That's not a knock on Sam. You knew that coming in. That's more on the stuff around him needs to be better, including, play calling, blocking, route running, catching, and then Sam's got to make better decisions as well. And so I think to your point, Ryan, now looking forward to next year, I've said before, look, a guy like Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchie, they can lead Notre Dame to a 9-3, 10-2 record next year. They can lead Notre Dame to a 10-2 record next year with the schedule Notre Dame plays. Steve Angeli with the Notre Dame team around him can beat Tyler Shuck in Louisville. He can. The question is do those quarterbacks give you an opportunity, if you are able to make the playoff, to go on a run? And my answer is next year, they do not. In 25, 26, 27, yes, they do. Next year, they don't, based on what we know. Now, could they make big jumps this offseason? Sure. But you don't need Riley Leonard to make a big jump. You just jump, you just need to be healthy. And that's really what it comes down to. So he gives you a chance to me. Now, again, a chance, because things gotta work out and you've got to make the changes and those type of things. But he's the kind of quarterback that if he's got good pieces around him, which he will, you can be a really dynamic team. And so he makes you I'll say this, Joe, he makes you a more dangerous team. And I think we go back to Kenny's comment, Ryan. How many extra wins does he get? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how many games they would have won next year without it. To your point, Ryan, I think they win at least one more game this year than they would have.
At least 10-2.
I think we can confidently say at least one more. I mean, would they beat Louisville? Well, I don't know. They lost to Louisville at Duke, right? Didn't they lose to Louisville when he was there? Okay.
Yeah.
So I can't say that. But he beat Clemson. And, but at least one, in my opinion. But as Kenny Moore said, the big thing is your ceiling is raised. Your potential as a team next year is raised. Will it pan out that way? No, because I think Sam Hartman raised the ceiling of this past year's team. They just didn't quite reach that ceiling of what they could be. But the floor was also higher with him as well, which is why you went 9-3 and not 8-4, 7-5, in my opinion.
Had a next question from Tom Connor, said, would Riley Leonard have transferred if Mike Elko was still at Duke? I heard rumblings before that even happened. So maybe, I don't know 100% though, Tom. I lean towards possibly though, but I don't know that for 100% of a fact.
Here's the thing that I would say, Ryan, is we heard rumblings before, and this is why I don't know the answer. We heard rumblings before, but we also were already hearing rumblings about Elko moving on to bigger jobs.
So it's part of the equation. Yeah.
So he's a smart kid. He probably thinking, if we keep winning like this, Coach Elko's not going to be here anyway.
That's fair.
So, but if Mike Elko would have walked into a middle of the year, hey man, I'm not going anywhere. Hope you're not either. Would he have stayed? I have no idea. No idea.
We had Nate with a question. He said, would David Cutcliffe be an option as an offensive analyst? Recruited Riley Leonard to Duke, had a previous connection to Notre Dame with Charlie. I think he'd be a tremendous asset to our offensive staff. I mean, he would if you could
Jared Parker also worked for him for 2 years at Duke in 17 and 18. Would he be an asset to you as an analyst? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. No question. No,
just having him around the quarterbacks at least.
Yes. I mean, he could help. He could help Gino Guidugli improve as a coach, which all of us, when we're in our 30s and 40s, can get better as coaches and learning from the guys that have proven it over a period of time. And so that's not a knock on Gino. That's not a statement in any way of Gino Guidugli, good or bad. It just means any coach at his stage of his career can get better by learning from the greats. And I do think David Cutcliffe was an outstanding offensive mind and quarterbacks coach for a long time. Long time. And it's not just Peyton and Eli. He's had other really good quarterbacks in his career, including Daniel Jones, who he turned into a first-round draft pick at Duke. So, and I loved that quarterback he had. What was his name? Was it Lewis? Remember that year they won like 10 games and played Johnny Manziel in the Yes, that's who it was. Yeah. I really liked that offense with him at quarterback too, which shows me that David Cutcliffe can win with different types of quarterbacks, not just drop backs like Peyton and Eli. He won with some mobile quarterbacks at Duke.
Yep,
he did.
We had a question from Irish Blood who says, Brian, as you are discussing previous quarterbacks versus Riley, can you briefly talk about how Steve Angeli is on a scale between Sam Hartman versus Riley Leonard might help explain Riley's advantages.
Well, and the question was about just pure talent, I believe, correct? Steve Angeli to me is kind of right in the middle, maybe leaning a little bit more towards Hartman than
Yeah.
Riley Leonard. Steve does some nice things. He throws a nice ball. He's a decent athlete. He just doesn't do anything great. And I don't think he ever becomes anything great. He doesn't have great ball placement, although it looked to be better this year. And I hope he proves me wrong, Ryan. I really do. He seems like a great kid, and I love the swagger he plays with. But I just don't see anything special in Steve. Where, like I said before, when I watch Steve throw in pregame, he just looks like just what I expect to see a scholarship player throwing the ball at Notre Dame look like. When I watch Kenny throw the ball, you're like, whew, that thing just comes out different and just looks different. Everything about it's different. And that's the difference to me. And then, of course, he's a decent athlete, but he's not going to be a guy that's going to go out there and really scare teams with his legs, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So you agree with that, Ryan? Kind of in the middle, leaning towards Sam. Again, we're talking pure physical tools. Obviously, Sam's a way better quarterback now because he's a 6-year senior. We're just talking physical tools.
Coleman Smith, is it fair to say Riley Leonard is what you hoped Tyler Buchner could have been based on Tyler's junior film?
I mean, they're a little different to me. Like, I think that Riley Leonard can go through an entire game and not get one designed run and rip you up. I think if you're calling an offense with Tyler Buchner and you don't have design runs in there, you're not maximizing his ability. I think Tyler was ever going to be a pure drop back quarterback. I think Riley Leonard can develop into a pure drop back quarterback. And what I mean by that is he's always going to scramble and use his legs, but he's a guy that's just you're in a passing drop back pro style offense and he can rip you up. Tyler Buchner never goes into an offense like that and is maximized. And that's why the Bama fit never made sense.
Yeah.
In a lot of different ways, right? And so no, I don't. I've said this before. I think if you're going to say a former Notre Dame, if a former Notre Dame quarterback would have been what we hoped he would be, that's Riley Leonard. It's more Phil Dracovic, Deshaun Kaiser-ish, those type of guys than Tyler. Tyler was more of a dynamic run throw guy. To me, Riley Leonard's a quarterback that can run. To me, is a little bit different.
Okay,
you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to run him for him to be dynamic. Like,
sure.
If Tyler Buchner doesn't use his legs in the Gator Bowl last year, the offense isn't as good.
That's fair.
Like, that's what I mean.
Yeah, makes sense. We had a super chat from Michael S. Thank you so much. How do Riley Leonard's skills compare to Ian Book? I mean, so he's 4 inches taller than Ian. He's a more powerful athlete than Ian. I think speed-wise, they're probably similar-ish. I think Ian ran like 4.58 or something like that, right? 4.59. Like he was a pretty fast kid. And I think that their arms are similar-ish. I mean, the thing about Ian was that like Ian didn't lack tools, right? Like Ian could run and Ian had a pretty strong arm. Ian just lacked the wherewithal to take chances. Sometimes he was a little bit risk adverse at times, right? So I think from a pure talent perspective, though, Riley's a bigger, stronger version who has a little bit more arm gifts from a slot perspective and throwing off platform a little bit, but probably just pure arm strength and just straight line speed. They're probably similar-ish to a degree. Right. I mean, yeah.
The biggest difference to me is just here, the ability to process things quickly. I never thought Ian could process things quickly. That was always that, and I think that led to some of his unwillingness. The other thing too, this is more of a stylistic difference, right? Because of the body type, you were never going to be using Ian Book on a lot of called runs. Notre Dame, they'd use occasional 3rd and 1 outside zone. They'd run the occasional quarterback power. But Ian Book at 205, 210 in college is not a guy you're going to be running a run game around him. A lot of his running came from scrambles and making plays with his legs when things broke down. And that's something that Ian certainly brought to the table, where Riley can be more of a true part of your run game if you want it to be that way. And that's not so much a stylistic difference as much as it's a usage difference because of the first thing you talked about, Ryan, which is the difference in body.
Right.
All right, here we go. Oh, we already answered that one. Sorry.
Logan Trailer. What is the likelihood of either Steve Angeli or Kenny Minchie transferring?
I don't know that either of them are going to transfer. I mean, I don't want to project and say that this guy's going to leave or not. I don't know what kind of competitors they are. I don't know what kind of support system they have. I hope that they all stay in battle, knowing that this is a 1-year guy, learn, develop, and play. What's going to be interesting, Ryan, is what happens if Steve Angeli comes out in a bowl game and plays really, really well.
Right.
Does the high
In the
school
hot
coach and the
commodity a little
family
bit.
start getting some calls from some schools that maybe missed out on guys they wanted in the portal?
Right.
I can see that because, he's a Notre Dame kid. He's going to have 3 years of eligibility left. He will have a little bit of experience. He's a swagger kid and a confident kid and a no moments too big kind of kid if he plays one in the bowl game. I could see some first-year coach looking to start his program over. Like, I could see the coach at I don't know what they have, but let's just say they needed a quarterback. I could see Fran Brown getting on the phone with the coaches of Bergen Catholic going, hey, man, you think there's any chance this kid would want to come play for us?
It's possible.
Like, we're trying to get back into Jersey. I'd love to have a kid like that can come be here for 3 years. So if he plays well in the bowl game, he could make himself more attractive, which would enhance maybe his potential of leaving. But I don't want to assume that he there's just this assumption amongst some fans that all these kids are going to leave. Well, most of these kids are more competitive than we are, which is why they don't all leave. There's a ton of kids in the train. But could you imagine what the portal would look like, Ryan, if these kids were as mentally soft and as fragile and unwilling to compete as we project them to be based on how we just assume every kid who's not playing is going to transfer? There'd be 10 times as many kids in the portal as what there is now.
Yeah. Well, I think for these two situations, it's a little bit interesting because Kenny's only going to be a redshirt freshman next year, right? So it's like he's still a young dude, man. Like, he's still super young. And I have to think that, I don't know, I could be wrong about that, but I have to think that there's a little bit of patience that's in there, right, as far as being the guy. But I could be wrong about that, obviously. The Steve Angeli one's really interesting because he'll be obviously a third-year player. So he's in like that weird gray area of like, yeah, I want to go and play if I'm not the starter, but also I'm close to my Notre Dame degree more than likely, right? So like, do I figure this thing out before I end up transferring? So it's going to be interesting to watch, but I'm not immediately like, oh my God, they're all going to transfer, right? Like, I'm not that dude at all. So I think that these situations are very different as well. So it's a wait and see situation for me. TJS says, if Riley Leonard entered the portal last year, would Notre Dame still target him? And would the season have went different? Brian, immediately, I would say, no way of knowing this, right? But also probably not as far as the one that they would target. I just don't know if Tommy Rees would have loved his style as much as maybe Jared Parker would love his style. You know what I mean? So I think that Sam was Tommy's guy, like I think that he fit what Tommy wanted to do as a team. And I don't know if Riley Leonard would have necessarily been his cup of tea, but he's also doing really well with Jalen Milroe this year for, at least a little bit down the stretch. So maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm not necessarily sure that Riley would have been the first option on the board for him.
I think you nailed it, Ryan. I was going to say this was going to be my answer, and I think you nailed it. If Tommy Rees was the one making the decision, I don't think so. I think you would have probably still gone with Tyler, or excuse me, with Sam. If Jared Parker was the one making that decision, like let's say Tommy Rees would have left right after the USC game, Jared Parker gets promoted immediately. I think he would have been the guy they went after. I do, just because of what we believe Jared Parker wants to do offensively. But that didn't happen until February. So by then the decision had been made. So I don't think anything would have changed if he would have been in the portal. Now, if you were to ask us our opinion, I'll tell you mine, Ryan can tell you his. If it came down to last year at this time and Sam Hartman versus Riley Leonard, I mean, I've been pretty consistent.
Oh, it's been very consistent. That Riley Leonard would be his guy, as I was as well. I mean, if Riley Leonard was on the board of 2022, just based upon that, I know that people will say like, well, technically Sam Hartman was more productive than Riley Leonard as a passer, in which I would say, give me Riley Leonard all day over Sam Hartman. That would be mine.
So I got a little gung-ho with the hands there, Ryan. Smacked the mess out of my camera or my microphone. I would have definitely taken Riley Leonard over Sam Hartman a year ago.
Yes.
I would have. and that's based on things you and I have said in the past, not just things we're saying now.
All right. We had Frank G with a question. He says, does the receiver room need more transfers for next year, even with the freshman class that is existing? If so, who are some guys to know about? So, Frank, we already mentioned guys to know about. I would, one, go look at Riley Leonard's follow list on either Instagram or Twitter. Or two, you can go to boris@irishbreakdown.com. We'll be able to throw names out there when we feel like it is a good time to throw it out there. But Notre Dame is still open to taking in a third transfer portal wide receiver. It is not going to be a guy just to fill a number. But if there is a guy out there that they like, that makes sense, and it brings something to the table that they maybe don't have or that they want more of, we do believe that Notre Dame will push for a third wide receiver. But as for names, we'll drop them when we can on the message board, or you can go to Riley Leonard's follow list, and I'm sure that will help you out a little bit.
My answer to this, Ryan, as far as need, no, they don't need to go to the portal for another receiver. It's not a need. It's a want. I'm comfortable with, now that you've added two, I'm comfortable where the room is right now. It'd be pretty good with the freshmen coming in. But at the same time, as we said before, Notre Dame has they are pushing to make this the best roster they can for next year. They want to make a run. They flat out want to make a run. And because it's such a loaded portal class, it makes sense to do so. Yeah.
Yep. A lot of good wide receivers, man. Whole lot of them.
So Ryan, real quick, how many starred questions are on your end?
17.
Okay. I'm only seeing one.
Okay.
So you're going to have to, you're going to have to do that. If you'd like for me to I can read them and we can kind of flip roles if you'd like.
Fine. Okay. Yeah, whatever. That's fine. So we had a super chat from Nathan Milton. Nathan, thank you so much as always. How bad on a scale of 1 to 10 did it get in the wide receiver room?
1 to 10, with 1 being the worst, I would say 3. It could have been worse. There could have been a literal physical altercation that could have made it worse.
I would say 10 would be the worst on this scale.
Okay, 10 the worst. Like then I'll go 8. Okay, then I'll go 8. Okay. It could have been worse. There could have been, like I said, physical altercations. I mean, there are certainly things that could have happened worse than what happened this year. But yeah, it got really bad. It was an 8. It was an 8, and it was a lot of different things led to that. So yes, 8.
All right. We have a question from Quinn Kibler. Says, what's the backstory on this? Riley Leonard's name has been connected to Notre Dame since we played them, it seems. We went through a lot of the backstory, Quinn. Yeah. We went through all of that at the beginning.
Well, in fairness, he asked this before I think we started the show.
Gotcha.
But yes.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, the backstory is it was Notre Dame's guy from the beginning, right? The minute that it became a possibility that he was going to enter the portal, that was a guy that they had their eyes set on. I know that there was obviously some relationship between Sam and Riley that was already pre-existing, but I think, Quinn, where did it come from? I think that because I know this for a fact is that the defensive staff was consulted about, like, hey, Riley Leonard's entering the portal, or Riley Leonard is in the portal. What did you think about him? Right? Like, how hard was he to stop? And the defensive staff raved about him, right? So that was obviously a big part of this as well, is that you saw the kid in person, and he's a kid that comes from a great academic institution, values religion, values academics, wants to play big time football. I think it just made a lot of sense from the backstory perspective there. We had Ken Pluto. One thing that endeared Hartman to the fans and teams was his total buy-in and leadership on the field, in the weight room, and other off-field activities.
Agree. I mean, that's well said, Ken. I mean, he had well said. We talked about that last spring, Ryan. That was the thing where we thought, okay, this kid is really bought in, because the big thing we heard from people was he just showed up and he's just one of the guys. Now it's huge. And Riley Leonard's going to have to be that way as well, Ryan. You know him a lot better than I do, but he strikes me as the kind of kid that's exactly what he's going to be. Yes. He's not going to walk in thinking, I'm big time, I'm this, I'm that. I want to come here and compete and win and do all the things that it's not like Sam wanted to do.
I literally had him on the podcast from an NFL draft perspective in the summer. And at that point, he's coming off of an all-ACC season, preseason hype as far as potentially being a first-round draft pick, and a lot of positive feedback in that regard. And just like talking to a guy, man, like, just, it wasn't like a big time, like, I've had some interviews in the past with NFL draft prospects where I'm just like, that guy thinks he's better than me. And there was just no good conversation that was going to come out of it. Never got those vibes. Never once got those vibes. And I've checked with him just for some honesty here, Ken. I've checked in with Riley. I checked in with him after he got hurt against Notre Dame. I checked in with him early in the season, and I have been kind of texting him every few weeks to see like how he's doing type of situation. And he always returns the call, right? He always returns the text. So seems like a very good guy to me. I don't think that's going to be an issue for him. There was a second part to that, Brian, that I missed, but Ken Pluto expanded on that. He said, can we expect the same level of leadership from Riley? Are they similar in personality that everyone is drawn to? Hard to be a captain in a one-year team member.
Yeah, and I don't care if he's a captain or not. I mean, Jack Cohn wasn't a captain. Didn't bother me at all. Sam was, but Sam was in a unique situation where Sam was walking into a relatively young roster around him. So it was different circumstances. But I mean, again, I think Ryan, you kind of answered that. He has that personality. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I agree with Lloyd. I'm sorry. I agree with Lloyd Christmas. I think he chose Notre Dame because he likes Ryan. I agree. I think Irish Breakdown gets the assist.
I'm just happy he returns the text message, Lloyd, but thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Here is another one from T Smith 0323. Do you think Mike Elko told Riley Leonard about his time at Notre Dame?
I don't know that those conversations happened. Perhaps. I don't know that it would have been overly helpful for Mike Elko and Riley Leonard to have that conversation because everything about Notre Dame then is different now. Different head coach, different offensive coaches. I mean, there's literally no one on staff at Notre Dame right now that was at Notre Dame in 2017. I'm thinking through it because Tommy Rees was the last one, right? Head coach was not. Quarterbacks. I mean, I'm no one on defense. Mickens didn't show up.
Mickens got there more like 2020.
2020. Yeah. I mean, so it's different. It's just different. And he might have told him about Notre Dame, I'm sure, but if they had that conversation, but I don't know if that would have been an overly helpful conversation.
Yep. Agreed. And but an interesting question for sure. Frank G with the question. He says, does the receiver room need more Oh, we already hit that one. Yep. My bad, Frank.
Yeah, I wasn't able to delete some of the ones we had asked when I beat up my microphone.
Arrow 520 says, do you think communication through the helmets pre-snap will increase offensive efficiency in the college game, especially with young quarterbacks?
Potentially, sure.
It could, yeah.
I would say you have to understand, though, with young quarterbacks, who's giving the signal to the other players, right? I mean, there's still going to be some of that. But, Ryan, like you talked about, I think you said Sean McVay did this. Is that who you said? Is like he basically would just
hurry up. He went right up to the cutoff.
Tell him where to throw the ball. Right.
He went right up to the cutoff and was like, "Hey, Jared, throw here on this play."
Yeah. I don't know that you can do that quite as much in college just because of the preparation, but certainly it should help efficiency. Will it just skyrocket it? I don't know, because I think, and you could also make the standpoint of it can also help defensive coaches because they can get calls in, made a little bit quicker too. I mean, so. Sure. It may balance it out, but yeah, we'll see.
We had a question from Dropping Dimes. Says, do you know if Notre Dame is or will participate in the new EA college football game? They better.
We don't have an answer to that, but I'd be shocked if Notre Dame doesn't do that. I'd very shocked.
Yeah. I mean, from both sides as well, right? It's like EA's missing an opportunity there from a money perspective, and Notre Dame would be as well, right? Where it's like that would not be beneficial for either side.
It'd be very bad for the brand for Notre Dame. Like it would hurt Notre Dame a lot more than it would hurt EA Sports in that instance, in my opinion. You were correct, Ryan. It is going to hurt both, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'll be pissed if Notre Dame's not in there. I'm still buying it. Buying it. Sure. It hurts Notre Dame a lot more than it hurts EA Sports if they do that.
Just for the what was the road to what was the career mode in there? I can't remember what it's called. Dang, I can't remember what it's called.
Dynasty mode.
Not the dynasty mode. The career mode where you you try to win the Heisman Trophy.
To the Hall of Fame or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I can't remember. Adam Joseph says, how confident are you that Riley Leonard can go into Texas A&M week 1 with a new offense against Mike Elko, who will have the advantage of scheming against a quarterback he knows well?
I would argue that it'll be more beneficial for Riley Leonard knowing Mike Elko's defense than it would be for Mike Elko knowing Riley Leonard, because Riley Leonard will be playing in a completely different offense with completely different players. That's going to be different than what Mike Elko schemed against this past season we played Notre Dame, where Mike Elko's defense is now what it's always been. It's the same thing. And that's part of what makes him so good, to be honest with you. So I think if anything, if anything, it's advantage Riley Leonard, but I don't think it's really an advantage for either one. A ton.
I don't think so either.
A ton.
I don't think so either.
But look, Riley Leonard gives you the best chance to go in and win that football game. And with look, A&M's gonna have a good football team next year. But if Marcus Freeman doesn't have his team more prepared to beat Texas A&M, and Mike Elko's there. Yeah, it's his first game there. Mike Elko's a heck of a coach. It's his first game there. This is going to be the beginning of year 3 for Marcus Freeman. So, I mean, is it going to be tough to go beat A&M at A&M? Sure. I mean, that's a tough place to play. Bama struggled to beat A&M this year, and I think A&M's going to be better coached next year than they were this year.
Outfield gets loud, man. Loud.
Yeah, but no. I mean, should that be a game that Notre Dame goes in and wins that game? Yes. And here's why I think I'm more confident, because, again, you don't have to always be perfect throwing the football. A&M's losing a lot of talent from their defense because of the portal and the NFL draft. Didn't they just have another D lineman? Didn't another D lineman just declare for the NFL draft, Ryan? They've lost 2 of their 5 stars to the portal, and I think another kid just announced the draft.
So did Shamar Turner enter the draft? That would be the guy probably.
So. Yeah, I saw a defensive guy declare yesterday. It was yesterday.
I know Fidel Diggs entered the portal. Obviously, Walter Nolan entered the portal. I think Overton also entered the portal on the defensive line. So, yeah, they've lost a lot of talent up front.
Yeah.
A whole lot.
Yep. So, yes, Notre Dame should go in there and win that game. There's no question.
I think you're talking about McKinley Jackson, probably, right?
The offensive lineman, right?
Defensive lineman. Defensive lineman. Okay. McKinley Jackson. Yeah.
That's right. He's the guy that entered the draft. They lost another defensive lineman.
I didn't know if you were talking about Shamar Turner, because he would be another guy that might enter, but yeah.
Yeah. So they're going to lose some dudes. And, Mike Elko is going to do well there, I think. But I'm sorry. We should not expect them to lose. I mean, if they lose that game to Texas A&M, I'm going to be frustrated.
Yeah.
I'll just say that. I'll just say that.
Yeah, because it should be a little bit of a transition for Elko as far as just from the roster more than anything. But All right. So we already answered that question, I believe. And someone said it's Road to Glory is what it's called.
Right.
That is 100% correct. Eric Santini said, what would Notre Dame's record have been this year? We already answered this one a little bit.
Yeah.
If they have had Riley Leonard instead of injury-free, hypothetically. Eric, I said this already. I think it's at least 10-2. I'm not necessarily here to say they would beat Louisville, they beat Clemson if Riley was playing, but I 100% believe that they would beat Ohio State. So I would say that 10-2 would be the floor for what Notre Dame would have been this season with Riley, just based upon his legs in that Ohio State game.
Agree.
We had another one. Terry Tyler just said, is Jack Kaiser coming back next year?
I don't know. He hasn't. I mean, not every kid that's not coming back is sitting out the bowl game. I mean, if you were to ask if I'm going to predict right now, I'd predict that one of the linebackers comes back. We've said that all along. It's not going to be Marist. It's not going to be JD. The only option could be Jack.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. Jack had a good year this year, Ryan. It's just as long as it's not the volume percentage that it was this year with him and the younger guys.
Yeah.
As long as they don't just plug him in at will and play him the same percentage of the snaps that Marist played this year.
80% or 85%,
I'm fine
whatever
with
it is.
I'm fine with that. It needs to be more of a true split, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But look, Jack Kaiser's a veteran kid. He could be a good leader for your football team next year. There's no reason not to bring him back if he's bought in. As long as you're honest with him about what his role is going to be and he embraces that role, then I don't see any problem. My fear, however, is with Al Golden, that he makes a decision to start him and play him a bunch, or even worse, that he starts him at Mike.
Yeah.
And that would be a big mistake. And I said, why do I fear that? Because that's exactly what he did against Central Michigan when J.D. Bertrand got hurt.
Sure.
That's my fear.
Yeah, I mean, if Jack is okay with being a little bit more of a part-time split share guy and then also still playing special teams like he does, because Jack Hodges is a good special teams player. I'd be totally okay with that
Very,
from a
yeah.
leadership perspective.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. We had Jason Chaprick, who says, one thing I think many are overlooking is how much the running threat of Riley Leonard will open things up for Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love, much like Buckner did for the running backs in 2022.
Yeah. We talked about that during it, and that's absolutely a big part of what he's going to do. And that's the part where Ryan and I were talking about how he's an elevator, right?
Yep.
And that's exactly a big part of it. No question.
Agreed.
Good observation, Jason.
He will definitely open things up. There's no doubt. Andrew, I just clicked off one. Dang it. Andrew Gilmore had a question though, Brian. I'm not going to be able to bring it up because I actually clicked it off and I don't know where it is in this chat. But he had basically asked, what is Ohio State's plan at quarterback now? Are they going with Devin Brown? Are they going to bring in a transfer quarterback? Are they going to potentially look at? Like, there's obviously a lot of uncertainty that's in the air right now for Ohio State.
So, Ryan, I know I believe you have a little bit of something you've heard about that, and then I've heard a couple things as well. So I'll let you start.
Yeah, so I think I forget what show it was, but I had talked a little bit about the Cameron Ward situation for Ohio State because that's been a guy that's been linked to him a lot. There's already some early crystal balls and some future casts or whatever the heck they call them in the certain sites about Cameron Ward ending up in Ohio State. But the early conversation I had gotten was the pitch was not necessarily received at a high level from the Cameron Ward side of things, from the family side, and basically at that point, it was, he was looking at some other schools or he was still mulling over potentially declaring for the 2024 NFL draft. So both things were kind of on the table. I was told actually yesterday. Yeah, it was yesterday early in the morning that I guess Ohio State has kind of made a more assertive effort here a little bit. So there's a little bit more smoke.
That's one way of putting it.
Yeah. They've made a little bit more of a hard push.
They've upped their effort.
Yeah,
Ryan.
They've upped their effort for Cameron Ward. So there's a little bit more, I think, fire to that initial smoke. I do think that it's a more plausible opportunity, I think, to get Cameron Ward than it was about a week or so ago. So I think that Ohio State is in the running for Cameron Ward as of today. It's going to be really interesting, though, because, again, he's a player that is not just mulling over transfer options. He's still also getting NFL feedback and continuing that process as well. But I think that right now, I would say that Ohio State's clearest answer is Cameron Ward in the portal. After that, if they miss on Cameron Ward, I have no idea because you have to bring in a transfer portal guy, guys.
Okay, so that's where I have a little bit of something on this one, Ryan. There are some guys that if Ohio State doesn't get the portal quarterback they want, there will be some players that may then enter the portal after bowl season that would be jumping in to go to Ohio State if that opportunity is there. So to your point, if they don't get Cameron Ward, they're in trouble as far as who's currently in the portal.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there aren't some guys currently not in the portal that might not look at that situation and say, okay, Ohio State's still looking for a quarterback. My circumstances have just changed.
And they're desperate, and maybe they can offer some more incentives.
Up their reasons even more to go to Ohio State. So, yes.
Yes. It's a good way to put it.
Strange USC's quarterback portal. Like, I heard Will Howard.
Well, Howard was the early name that people kept talking about.
Yeah, and I haven't heard anything since then. I mean, is there a chance they're going to go with – go ahead.
Apparently, Lincoln Riley, when the road opened up, I guess he went out to see Will Howard, right? Like, he didn't travel to see him, but I mean, otherwise, I haven't heard anything else.
I haven't heard anything, so I wonder if it's like Howard or bust, like it was with Leonard and Notre Dame. That fit doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But yeah, that'll be interesting. Either A, he's just focused on going to the NFL himself, or B, it's more of like hey, we've got Malachi Nelson, we've got Miller Moss, and we got kids that we think can run this offense. It'll be interesting. Very interesting.
Very interesting. Yep. We only had a couple more left here. We're going to Football Hound next. Was the question of Brian and Ryan, after the bowl game, will you be doing a grading of the coaching staff?
I don't really do that. We'll grade how the positions did, and that's part of it's the coaching staff, but I don't hand out grades for the coaching. I don't hand out grades for anything anymore. We don't do grades for players or anything like that. So it's a little bit different. But yeah, we'll evaluate the performance of the coaches after the season. Yes.
Yep. I saw someone say that Dante Moore is going to Ohio State. I saw some of that rumor earlier, but I would say this, guys, if Cameron Ward goes to Ohio State, Dante Moore is not going to Ohio State.
Well,
So,
and the other thing too is I don't know that Dante Moore's dad would ever allow that. I mean,
who knows? Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about it from that capacity. Yeah. Who knows?
I just love that the latest rumor is that he might go back to Oregon. And I'm like,
oh, someone put out a fake tweet about it, I think, which was pretty hilarious. So it was like a fake graphic and everything. So
this was an article that somebody that covers recruiting talked about how it's an option. It's not the leading option, but it's an option. And I'm just kind of laughing because I was like, dude, that's what you should have done in the first place.
Could you imagine him with a year under Bo Nix and just rolling in as a redshirt freshman? He would have been.
This is why he said, stop listening to your freaking dad. Take control of your own life. You know what I mean? Go where you want to go. But that is what it is. Oh, he would have learned. He'd be stepping into this situation right now and feeling really good about himself.
Yeah, he'd be starting for 2 years and then he'd be in the NFL. It would have been a good situation. Wait, Riza just threw in a super chat here. Thank you, Riza, so much. If there is one thing you could know now about 2024, what would
that would tell you Notre Dame would compete for national championship? What would it be?
What would it be? I mean,
I will get very specific, Ryan. I know exactly what mine is, and I'll bet you $20 you're going to. Well, I'm going to bet you $20 you'll agree with me because then you'll just disagree with me just to get the $20. So I think you're going to. If you could tell me that the offensive line is going to be really good next year, I'll say Notre Dame's going to compete for championship. Offensively, that's my number one. If the Notre Dame offensive line is good next year, they're going to be a really dangerous team because then they'll have a top 10 offense, in my opinion. Defensively, it would be this: if the young talent that is as good as we think it is, they will be a team that can compete for a championship next year. Those are my two, Ryan.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think all of them are on offense, which is kind of funny. I have 3 things that I want to see on offense. One, the certainties. Offensive line play would definitely be one of them. They would be high on the list. I would say health of Riley Leonard would be the second one, being able to have him for the entire season at a fully healthy capacity. And number 3 would just be to expand your passing game approach from a diversity perspective and aggressiveness perspective. Those would be the 3 that I think would signify a big, because I just think the baseline for the defense, even if Al Golden leaves or whatever, like the baseline for the defense, I think is still going to be a good defense. You know what I mean? The offense is the one that I still want to see more from. All right. We had Robert Bishop who had a question of, will Notre Dame's young and inexperienced offensive line be better next year than Riley Leonard had at Duke this year?
Could it be? It's got more God-given talent. Duke had a pretty good offensive line this year, Ryan. It got a little banged up at times too, but before it did, I mean, I think Graham Barton missed the Notre Dame game, for example. That's a very good offensive. I mean, not great talent outside of, I think you've said Barton's probably a day 2 guy, right? Maybe late day 1, day 2 guy.
Top 50-ish.
The rest of them are just veteran guys that have played a ton of snaps. They weren't a great unit. I mean, they weren't great individual parts outside of Barton. They were just a really good unit this year, in my opinion. There's going to be a lot more talent in the Notre Dame offensive line. Will it be as good of a unit? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think offensive line play is so predicated on experience and development that it's going to be tough because, like you said, I mean, Graham Barton was a redshirt junior and Jacob Monk was a redshirt senior and actually a 6-year senior, I believe. And those are just that was a very veteran group. I mean, even you brought over the Jake Hornibrook kid from Stanford, who was like a 4th or 5th year guy. So you have an experience there. Notre Dame's could definitely be better. But I mean, baseline, obviously the experience, I think kind of just gives you a higher floor in that certain situation. Right. We had this one from Conrad. If Xavier Watts stays, does Notre Dame still target a transfer safety? Saw Jaden Osbury's brother, Austin, jumped into the portal. Thanks for all the hard work, IB.
Right. I don't know how much Austin played this year. I'm going to go look real quick at Auburn. I liked him coming out of high school. I thought he was a good player. I don't know how, again, I don't know how much experience he has there. I'm trying to go there now, see their roster. Did he do anything this year? Looks like he played 3 games and had 1 tackle. Played 4 games and had 1 tackle last year. So I don't know how he's developed at Auburn. I don't know if he got hurt. I don't know anything like that. But what I know is I did like him out of high school. The thing is, I don't know that Austin comes in and is what Notre Dame needs right now, because what they need right now is a guy that can come in and play for you right now.
Sure.
So that's more of where I would be for that. But if they wanted to look at him and you thought that would also kind of help keep Jaden here, it's worth it to me. If you have the scholarship, it's a good football. At the very least, Austin Osbury is going to be a good special teams player for you down the road. At the very least, in my opinion, Ryan. Is he ever a starting safety? I don't know. Could he come in and play in 2024 as a rotation safety? I don't know the answer to that. I don't. But do I think he's a kid? He's a good football player or good potential. I liked him out of high school. He was a 4-star, top 200, 250 caliber kid for me coming out of high school. So I'd take a look at him for sure, especially if you, I said, if you think it means that there's a chance that it helps keep, helps keep Jaden here, certainly. And he looks like he played the first 3 games of the year, then didn't play again until Ole Miss, and then got hurt again. Or didn't play any after that. So I don't know if it was injury related or what, but he did play 31 snaps on special teams this past season.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't watch Austin coming out of high school, obviously, but Notre Dame obviously definitely from just a number perspective need to continue to look at some safeties in the portal. Yeah. There's actually some pretty good safeties in the portal too, man. I was looking at that like yesterday or this morning, and I'm like, there's some guys they have interest in, so we'll see. We had Conrad who also asked, looks like Notre Dame only has 11 games scheduled for next year. Any idea who they will schedule?
They're going to play Army as the 12th game, and it's not a secret anymore. It's been out there now, but yeah, they'll play. I don't know when. There's been rumors it'll be week 0, rumors it'll be later in the year. I don't know when that'll be, but they'll be playing Army in week 0.
It's the Sun Bowl guy kind of let the cat out of the bag, right? And someone had reported it before then, but then he kind of verified that that's
Tim Priester had mentioned that they were going to play Army, which is fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's something that if you find out, you shouldn't tell people.
Yeah,
but so he had that a while ago, about a month or so ago, and then the Sun Bowl guy kind of said that it was going to be Yankee. I mean, we kind of knew it was going to be Yankee Stadium and all that, but yeah.
All right, and then we had, this is the last one, unless a couple more pop up here, but we had a question from Irish Gordy Knott, who says, what position does Dallas Golden project to best? Well, Notre Dame's recruiting Dallas Golden as a corner, Irish Gordy Knott. He could play safety. He could probably even play rover as his body develops. Like he
could play running back. He could play wide receiver.
He's a great offensive player.
He's this year's Xavier Watts in that he could legitimately be a dude at multiple positions, including playing on both sides of the ball. Like, I don't know if he's as good of an offensive receiver as Xavier was, but I mean, as far as like a slot, a guy that can do stuff, I mean, Dallas Golden's a dude. Notre Dame likes him as a corner. I do as well. Can he play safety? Absolutely. And he played safety. I believe he played mostly safety for prep this year, Berkeley prep this year.
I believe so. Yeah.
Just like Cree Thomas did. And I believe Benjamin Morrison played a decent amount of safety his senior year as well, just because team needs. I love him at corner.
Also, I remember I was talking to the head coach for Brophy Prep, and he was like, yeah, we're playing Cree at safety because we don't want people to just avoid him like one side of the field. We want him to be involved everywhere. You know what I mean? Like we don't want people to just avoid him that type of way. So
yeah, he's really good.
Yep,
he's my number one. I'll just say it. He's my number one corner in the class that Notre Dame's on right now. He's my top guy. I think he could be a dude.
He could be a dude. All right,
I think that'll do it. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to answer this one real quick. TJS just said, "Is Notre Dame interested in safety Andrew Mkuba?" I don't know if they have any interest, TJ, but I have heard from a pretty good source that is probably going to be a Texas-Oklahoma thing at the end of the day.
And he's a Texas kid, right? He's from Texas, I believe. Yeah,
Texas kid, and then obviously Venables is down in Oklahoma now, so that's the tie there as well. So, all right, well, folks, that's going to end the show today. Want to thank everybody again. Riley Leonard, officially a member of the Notre Dame football family. Thank you so much for joining the show to break that down early on, and then also hitting the mailbag at the end. We'll be having a lot more transfer portal news, so if you're not signed up at boards.irishbreakdown.com, you should make sure to go sign up at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Also, if you're just a regular subscriber or listener, make sure that you hit that like button at the bottom of the screen. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And that notification bell tells you when every show is coming up to remind you all of that as well. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, you can also give us a 5-star review. That would be very much appreciated. And we'll be back again to see you all very soon here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.